Yes. Yes.
So, if you feel, and I can give an example if you want, a particular situation is beyond the level of control that you need for a manifestation of, say, anger, is the best thing just to walk away?
Absolutely, no question. I mean, but the thing is, even to do that, it demands so much intelligence, doesn't it? Because once the anger is so strong, it's almost like it's too late, isn't it? So to have enough discipline, I mean, you have to notice that before you even start to shout. Well and truly, you have to notice it well and truly before it comes to the mouth.
Okay.
Because it's too late. Once it's come to the mouth, that's the wheels falling off, and you can't reverse it then. So that's why we have to notice what's going on in our thoughts before it becomes emotional. That's the really advanced level.
And because I want to, with time, get on the Bodhisattva path, should I then, having walked away, take myself back to that same situation?
That's
to
up
use
to
it
you.
as a practice.
Yeah, of course. That's when you're if you're capable.
Okay.
I mean, this is where it's so interesting. This is where I love to use the example of my prisoners, because they don't have the option. They don't have the luxury to choose. They're in this cell with some kind of maniac who hates them and kind of just hates Buddhism and makes life just like, and they've got no choice. They don't have the luxury of choice. So you either go mad, or they are forced into the deep end where they're forced to work on their mind. And so for us, because we seemingly have the choice, it's already pretty powerful that we have the choice to walk away. But if you can really be brave enough, they have no choice. So it's very powerful. And sometimes we can see in our lives almost there's no choice. There's nowhere to turn, you know. So we're really brave enough. We can access something inside there.
Yeah.
You know, be brave. Try and be brave. Be brave. You know. So important. What else?
There's a question from online.
Yes.
So Justin has asked, having an imagination seems to be a bit dangerous. As an artist and creative mind, I have to constantly swim in possibilities. It feels like being carried away into worlds that have real
Absolutely,
feelings.
Yes, that's the nature of attachment.
I even have visceral responses to my imagination, both good and bad. How do I not lose myself as I entertain possibilities? That's
Which
from
Justin is this?
Justin Conklin from Oklahoma.
Oh, Justin. Hi, Justin. Hi. I know Justin. Yes, Justin. So the key to understanding this is to understand the nature of attachment. You see, it sounds very peculiar to us and a bit depressing to hear that our capacity for creativity, a main component is attachment. So when we understand this as a conceptual state of mind, attachment is an elaboration of something. Can you hear that? So if you're a great artist, you know, you see shapes and colours, well, they can utilize, they can manipulate and exaggerate and distort and make marvellous shapes and colours. You hear my point here? So technically, that's the skill of attachment. So if you mix attachment with intelligence, compassion, then you have a really marvellous person. You get my point? But if you mix attachment with lots of aggression and low-level attachment, greedy and grasping for sex and drugs and rock and roll and harming people, then you are a nightmare. So it's interesting, in our culture, we kind of glorify creativity. It's the supreme in our culture. Great scientists and great artists. So they're the top dogs in our culture, aren't they? And again, this is the fascinating point. In our culture, we can have wisdom and be a great scientist. You can have creativity and be a great artist. But like I say, you can still go home and beat up your wife. Because we don't think it's got anything to do with virtue and ethics. Whereas the Buddhist view is you can't have proper wisdom without ethics. And ethics would imply wisdom. This is really fascinating. When we understand this point we're discussing here, that when the delusions are distorting and exaggerating and embellishing things, that's its function. So if that's mixed with strong emotion and strong aggression and strong attachment and strong anger and strong want to get what I want, that component of attachment, that's the nightmare. But you can be like, look at Bach. I always think of Bach, you know. We had 27 children or something, 23 or something. He had to work pretty hard to keep them. And what he had to do was he wrote music for the church. He probably wrote 50 pieces a month. He couldn't keep up with it, you know. But listen to what he wrote. This genius. That's creativity. That's the ability of attachment, but mixed with intelligence and devotion and virtue, I'd say. So Justin, the whole point is why we have to have discipline. If we've got a very creative mind, it means we go berserk with fantasies. So we think fantasies are marvellous. Now, aren't you fortunate, Justin, you haven't confessed to it, but aren't you fortunate if your attachment isn't to killing and raping and torturing? Then look at the creativity there. So for example, I always remember one example I used years ago in America. I read about a fellow called BTK, Bind, torture, kill. That's what he called himself. For 30 years hidden. He was a nice Christian man, went to church, but his hidden life, because he'd say from past karmic torturing, past karma to harm people, because those tendencies were so strong, his attachment was to that, to torturing and harming people and abusing people. So he used the creative component of attachment. He had to have this special dungeon that nobody else knew about, and he had it all constructed, and then he would kidnap people, especially more than one, because he wanted to see the horror in other people's faces as the other person's tortured, because that's how he got his pleasure. So we think that's just monstrous, send the man to hell. But that's because he's got past karma for torturing, and he comes along with attachment. So instead of just cakes or drawing, he's attached to torture. So look at the creative component, the creativity component. His fantasy world must have been rich and impossible to stop. That's the energy of attachment. It's unable to be stopped. So just without the apathetic attachment, just attachment to cakes. But if we're a creative person, got that component of attachment, you can't stop thinking about the wonderful things. So that's where, see, in our world we think fantasies are marvellous. Well, excuse me, I mean, visualising the Buddha is fantasy too. That's a good way to use the creativity, because it creates virtue. But just raging on in your head, thinking it's so marvellous to be creative and doing, that's no benefit at all. It's uncontrolled, you go crazy. So that's why we have to learn to recognise what attachment is. And this is quite difficult to see. It's got multifaceted. So to harness the out-of-control component and learn to subdue the mind, then we can utilise these energies mixed with virtue and on the Bodhisattva path, mixed with virtue and goodness. Then it's beneficial, then it's powerful. But it destroys us otherwise. Does that make sense, people? Okay. Does it make sense? Okay, good. So what else? Andrew?
I got two, if that's okay. The first one is, I don't know if the first one. Second one, anyway, so I can't remember. The first one will come to me. The second one, so with the cancer situation, and you want to be doing what's best, so what's best? Let's say you have some knowledge, and then you go, I want to die because that'll stop the karmic seeds, and that'll be good. But then I also want to live to do more karma, and both, let's just say, are equally beneficial. Then what process does Buddha have to kind of use wisdom then to define what way to do it, or do you just go by your instinct, or
you can't, it's not possible, because if you don't have clairvoyance, you can't have that wisdom.
Yeah.
Very simple. So all you can do is have the wish to do what is most beneficial. So most people would attempt to go find doctors. If there are situations which you can find the medicine and doctors, please, with a pure motivation, do it. And then if you can't get fixed, that's when you start to come to reality. So just be reasonable, be sensible, according to the rules of your society. If it's going to cost you $1 million, then clearly you can't do it. But if you can do it, it's within your, like having a good Australian medical system, you can do it and the stuff there, and it's reasonable, with a pure motivation, knowing about impermanence, and not knowing that you don't know what the karma is, but wishing to purify, happy you're purifying. That's one of the major parts of the Bodhisattva path. When you do have problems, learning, it's very hard, learning to realise it's that karma's finishing, and so be delighted for this reason. So all you can just do that, and be reasonable. If you have more wisdom, then you've got something to base your choice on. But if we don't have the wisdom, we can't. You see what I'm saying? Yeah.
I think sometimes for me, I've noticed that some people that...
A bit louder, Kevin.
Okay, sorry. If someone has a narcissistic personality or
which means attachment, self-centered attachment, using Buddha's views.
Yeah, Buddhism doesn't quite work for them because they come in with a bad attitude, thinking, because they're doing Buddhism, they're better than everybody else, and they keep looking down on people.
I'm a bit lost. What do you say? I'm not confused.
My question is, if someone has those serious behavioral conditions...
You mean attachment?
Like
self-centeredness?
Yes.
That's Buddha's view.
Yeah.
Join the universe here, Kevin.
Yeah.
You mean a serious extra level of attachment and self-centeredness? Join the universe again. Then, question?
Those people maybe seek out some psychological treatment.
No, I mean, it's possible. Okay, I get what your point is.
No?
Kevin, everything is according to our capability.
Yeah.
So normally in our world,
Yeah.
if you're narcissistic, as you call it, if you're very attached and self-centered, and you're
Not
living...
me.
No, I know, darling. I'm talking in general terms. In general terms. If we're so caught up in attachment and so caught up in self-centeredness, then usually we can't see it. So, if by the time you get to hearing the Buddha's view and you think, well, that's a good idea, then already you're ready for it. But if you can't, and you're still full of rage because your partner's it's like you're the victim one, if you're still full of rage because your partner's beating you up and you're too terrified to leave, and you can't even hear Buddha's view, then obviously you find a person to help you. I mean, even if we're Buddhists, we need people to help us. It'd be reasonable. But it's not, I mean, in a way, yes, Buddhist psychology is more advanced because it does demand accountability. And often our suffering is so severe, we can't even begin to be accountable. We have to get part of the fear and the victim part first. So it's true, yeah, whatever we're capable of. Absolutely, Kevin. Does that answer your question?
I mean, it was related to someone I knew.
What, darling?
It was related to someone I knew who had these personalities. And
You mean attached and self-centered,
yes,
Kevin?
yes, but she was coming to Buddhist classes as well.
So then what did you see as the problem?
Instead of improving her, it kind of made her more worse.
How do you know, Kevin, by the way? How do you know? You're so informed. I mean, it's a serious question.
Yeah.
Are you really confident that your assessment is correct?
Well, I do counseling for a living.
Right. So you're fairly confident that you are correct.
Well,
This person...
in her emails, it was coming.
Okay, so tell me some of the words she's saying.
So she was saying how better she is than anybody else because she's doing this. How I'm not.
She said actual words like that.
Yes, and how
Actually, I am much better than anybody else.
but she said how I'm not doing enough, and so she would bring those.
Kevin, I'm
qualities.
really sorry, I can't hear you.
Okay.
I need you to say what your evidence is, and it's good for all of us to hear it.
Yeah, well,
What is your evidence from her words that indicates to you that
Yeah.
she's misusing Buddhism? So please say the words exactly that she said. Don't give me your opinion of what she
Okay.
said. Try and say the word she said, because that indicates her thoughts.
Okay. So she would indicate to me how I'm not doing enough.
What do you mean by that? Enough, not doing enough. What do you mean by that?
She's saying I don't commit wholeheartedly
To what? To what?
to anything, and even to Buddhism, and she would attack me. Well, I don't want to get too personal, but I got a sense that maybe it was being counterproductive for her. It was bringing up those
What was
issues.
counterproductive, Kevin?
The Buddhist ideas of being counterproductive. It made her more proud and more arrogant.
So what you're basically saying is, based on the words she said,
Yeah.
you feel
Yes.
that she became arrogant about it. That's essentially what you're saying,
Yeah.
arrogant, over-exaggerating her importance.
Yes. And
So what's your question then? What's the question,
so I just
Kevin?
think sometimes spiritual pride comes.
What, darling? What?
Spiritual pride comes into people's behavior.
It does. So then question,
So my
action point,
question-
question.
For me, I just felt that maybe Buddhism was being counterproductive in her life.
No, she was not using it properly is the better way to put it.
Okay.
Surely that's an easy way. That's very common, but in lots of ways.
Okay.
The misunderstanding of what meditation is, the misunderstanding of why you would do meditation, the misunderstanding of the number of people I've met all over the world, whether they're in prison or not in prison, and there's all examples of people who do, the Buddhists would say, due to some karma with meditating in the past,
Yeah.
they discover they've got some ability now, like they can meditate very deeply, they maybe have moments of kind of insight, or moments of kind of special feelings, and they really believe they become Buddha. They're like delusional, literally delusional. This can easily happen. This would easily lead to unbelievable, absurd, over-exaggerated arrogance.
Yes.
Of course that's possible.
possible?
Very possible.
Okay.
I mean, very possible, Ken. That's not Buddhism's fault.
So my point being, should those people have some type of psychology?
No, why should
before
they?
coming
Why
to
should they?
Buddhism?
No, why should they? Why?
Okay.
Why? Why?
Maybe it might give them an insight into who they are.
But why
and-
shouldn't this one? Buddhism is meant to be, Buddhism is perfectly capable of doing that.
Okay. But how long do they use it correctly?
Huh?
How long do they use it correctly?
Yeah, I mean, it's like everything, and the tool is a good tool. You have to learn to use it properly,
Okay.
But if you've got lots of attachment, lots of delusions,
Yeah.
then no matter what you do. I mean, there's many cases of that. I remember one person, a student of Lama Zopa's, who was super intelligent.
Yeah.
It looked like an incredible practitioner, but she became completely delusional, believing completely that she was enlightened.
Okay.
She even started in Central America. She was giving initiations, but she was really seriously delusional. And that, the way Lama Zopa said it was very interesting. He said, all he said was, this is a very interesting point now, not enough merit. Not enough merit. So that's weird to us. So what that means is,
Okay.
we can all have intelligence.
Yeah.
She knew the words. She could say the words. She wrote books and everything.
Mhm.
She knew the words. But merit means the work you've done in the past that helps you become virtuous, helps you recognize your mistakes, helps you purify. So if you have purification practices, which mean accountability, knowing who you are, observing your delusions, taking responsibility, it means creating lots of virtue, doing positive actions, loving compassion as well as even other practices. That subdues your mind, and then you're able to see more clearly. So to have intelligence without ethics is like, that's what that brings. She can be, this person is probably very intelligent, but there's not enough ethics there, and that's because the mind is too brittle and can't see the problems. So that's why we have to have purification and lots of practices. That subdues the mind, softens the mind.
And if I want to help her, what should I suggest?
Well, she doesn't think she probably doesn't think you can help her anyway, so you can't help her. Just listen to her criticism and shut up. So, how interesting. Think about it. Thank you very much. I mean, she's already criticising you and telling you off. She clearly can't hear a word. You're meant to be, are you her counsellor or is she your counsellor? I mean, I'm a bit confused here. Or is she a colleague?
Well, we are friends, but...
Huh?
I mean, we are friends, but because of my psychological training, I can deduce and energetic feel that
But she doesn't think she's got a problem, does she?
No.
Well, okay then.
Okay.
Love her for who she is.
Okay.
You can give her some lectures back if you want, but she mightn't listen.
Okay. Thank
That's
you.
what wisdom is. You can see maybe, and maybe you're right, then
Yeah.
compassion is the wish to help, but wisdom is knowing how.
Okay.
And if a person's not ready to hear it, it's like water off a duck. It's like in deaf ears, isn't it?
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. What else, people? Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, Venerable.
Good darling.
I'm wondering, do you think somebody need to be alone or being Buddhist monk or Buddhist nun in order to have truly inner peace and gain deep realization?
I understand, darling. I
Yep,
understand.
Yeah. Okay.
The quickest way to play like Federer, you know about tennis, the quickest way to be like Federer is to stop doing everything else and make tennis supreme in your life and practice 10, 12 hours a day for 20 years. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Well, it's exactly the same with trying to develop nirvana. Obviously, the quickest way is to give up sex, drugs and rock and roll and husbands and mortgages and children and dramas and go to the mountains. It's obvious. It's just quicker, that's all. You can play tennis once every Sunday. It'll take you a long time to be like Federer. It'll take you a long time just practicing a little bit as a layperson, or even as a nun or monk. Doesn't matter. Having vows, they say, is also helpful. So if you've also eliminated lots of dramas from your life, it makes it a bit easier. But it's the best way to do it is to go to the mountains and get it quickly. So it's a question of time and space. Of course it is. You know, the Buddhist thing is big on vows. He's very powerful for vows. You weren't here yesterday, were you? We talked about vows, okay? So that so we have our lay vows, controlling our body, not killing, not lying, not stealing, no sexual misconduct. But the more powerful vow is not have any sex at all. Now that's very weird in our culture. It seems like you're mentally ill or something. I remember some man who was he did Reiki, and he said because I was a nun and I was celibate, he said that's really quite a problem, you know, you're suppressing. He thought it was a bit mentally difficult. So people have these views, right? But it's sort of evident, if you think about vows, they may help you to refrain, to restrain your behaviour, what you do with your body and your speech. So clearly one of the very powerful attachments is to bodies, and therefore and to the lifestyle that comes with that, which husbands and children and mortgages, and therefore mortgages. Right? Do we agree with that? Naturally, and that's the really powerful thing in our entire culture. It's the same in the animal realm. We all want partners, you know, we want partners and families. I mean, that's the main thing in the West. Families and health are the thing that is supreme. So so giving that up, which seems weird in our culture, is obviously a very powerful thing to do, because then that's not disturbing you. So it's like Federer, you can then focus more on the job at hand. It's sort of logical. But most of us don't have the karma. We have to do what's beneficial for most of us. Maybe you have the karma to have 3 husbands and 7 children. Well, that's your karma, baby. Work with it. And depending on where you're at, you might even be more advanced than another person. So it's up to what you can do. But there's a logic of why you would be a monk or a nun, why you would have vows of celibacy. There's a logic to it. Do you understand?
Yes.
So it's up to what is best for us at any given time. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Yes, Ed.
I'm one of those people who has a wife and kids, and like a lot of other people in this room, I'm
That's right.
fairly time poor. So I
You
was,
want
wondering,
Okay.
I was wondering if you had any recommendations for daily practice to get, I guess, the most bang.
I understand. It's very sensible, actually. You need to do that. You need to do that, yeah. So, you know, that means if you've only got a certain time to do certain practices, it's obvious that the practices you have to choose would have to be the richest, most beneficial practices. Right. So keeping vows is one. It's like walking uphill. It's like walking backwards uphill if you try to practice ethics without vows. That's the point that Buddha really makes clear. Without Lama Zopa, as Lama Zopa says, just being good is not enough. And we showed the logic to it yesterday. Because with a vow, it's so stupendous for your mind that 24 hours a day you're keeping it. You're creating virtue and you're purifying your mind. Whereas if you just be a good person and don't kill only when you meet a creature not to kill, then you're never going to get enough virtue in your bank vault. Never got enough seed. So living in vows is the most powerful, best practice for most people. Then of course you go to the next level and practice the Bodhisattva vows. And they go from life to life. That's even more powerful, more amazing, more stupendous. So even just living in vows. We don't think this much. When we think of practice, we think of this tortured kind of sitting with your legs crossed and your eyes closed, you know? You don't need that for vows. If you live a good moral life in the framework of vows and have a little bit of confidence in the Buddha and do a few mantras and visualize the Buddha and purify every day, that is a stupendous practice. You can't get better than that.
So vows and purification.
Vows and purification, honey, I swear to you. Plus a little bit of extra, thinking of the Buddha, saying a few mantras.
Yep.
And then, of course, on top of that, being kind, being patient, working on your mind every day. That's real powerful practice. You're practicing all the components of all the entire path. Then the next level you go to, of course, if you're a Tibetan Buddhist, you then take empowerments at the Vajrayana level, and then you take the Tantric vows. So having the vows in the mind, all the Lamas say, we can't really understand how profound living in vows is. It's so powerful psychologically. They even say if you keep your vows purely, you can get enlightened in like 16 lifetimes or something. Just by keeping your vows purely. There's something so stupendous about having clear understanding vows and commitments and all these things. There's enormous power to doing this. Other practice on top without the vows is like wasting time. Not wasting time. Imprints are there. And the reason is this, it's logical. The reason is this. What makes any action we do virtuous in general is the motivation. So if you just be a nice person, no vows, but you be a nice person and do nice things for people, that's incredible. But usually our goodness is fairly weak. Our kindness and our virtue and our compassion is fairly weak. So meaning you're not a bodhisattva yet. You've got to have sleep and you've got to have food, you've got to have a friend, you've got to have partners, you've got to have all the dramas that go on with life. So then every now and again we do a good thing, then there's some virtue there, but the motivation is not so strong. So the karmic seed is not so strong. Whereas you do it in the context of vows, right there, because of the power of vows, the virtue is much more powerful, the seeds are much richer, and the purification is much more powerful. So straight away, even that's just a lay vows. Then you go to bodhisattva, then you go to tantric. So having your vows, and having also, the other point is in the Vajrayana, they say having all these 3 sets of vows in your mind stream, you have all the tools to get enlightened, no matter how long it takes. So this is the way the Lamas would talk. Now it depends on where you go. If you're a Zen practitioner, you don't talk this way. If you're a Theravada, you don't talk this way. I mean, you would about vows, but not the tantric vows. But the emphasis on vows, and initially it sounds kind of boring, like all sort of, I don't know what it sounds to us. We think, I want to do practice, you know, good, but in the context of vows, then there's more power. But the vows are what makes it most powerful. And they're the ones that help you get aligned with powerful ethics at a very deep level. And also the simple point about even just lay vows. Like we said yesterday, look at the human world. Most humans kill something. Have a look at the human world. Even in most religions, it's cool. Most humans have a tendency to kill something or other. Isn't it? Would you agree with that?
In a lot of religions, yeah.
Not just religions, everywhere. Everywhere. It's normal among all humans, in all cultures. And in all, I mean, it's rare to find a culture or a philosophy that says don't kill anything. Would you agree with that? Would you agree? So therefore most people, and one of the worst negative actions you can do, the Buddha says, is killing. One of the worst negative actions, it sends you straight to the lower realms. Right? And then it also has the residual result, whatever lifetime you've got, including a human, you continue to kill, which sends you to the lower realms. It'll happen to you, you'll get killed, and you'll have an environmental result. The worst one is the tendency to keep killing, because it ends up straight back in the lower realms. So if you live in vows of not killing, you might have to struggle in this life to keep them, but it has such power for your mind psychologically and karmically. Next life you get a human life, you'll wake up that little 3-year-old boy who had compassion for the lice. There's never will be not a single thought to kill, and because you've kept vows of not killing, you don't even feel you need to kill. You don't even meet situations where you'll get because that's the power of vows. So you're protected. Therefore, you can use the human life to actually do some decent things called get enlightened. Do you understand my point? Vows are have such long-term benefit. It's unbelievable. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Give you all the right conditions. That's the way to make your life useful. Then every now and again you take the 8 Mahayana precepts. Every now and again you do a little retreat. You study. Do what you can. But the key one, the infrastructure, the nervous system of a spiritual practice is your vows. And so that means study them, learn them, and want to keep them. It is stupendous.
Thank you.
Do you understand? Someone else? Yes, Andrew.
Can you clarify for me? I understand single point of concentration and like how to do it, let's say, but then I don't understand the connection between how that then increases your focus and to get your delusions.
You don't understand the relationship between having single point of concentration and seeing your mind. What do you mean?
Well, yeah. I guess seeing your mind to the point of like if someone cuts you off in a car, you're like, how does that literally work? Can you connect those dots for me? I think I know, but I don't
I'm really
understand.
lost. What? Ask the question again.
So I understand with single point of concentration, how to do it. And
Okay, stop. So what does it bring? What's the result it brings? Even short term, what's the result?
Yeah,
what's the benefit of single point of concentration?
focus, I think, and the ability to focus on what you want to.
The ability to concentrate.
Yeah.
Okay, but as you're progressing in this concentration, what's the natural result of that? Even in your meditation, what's the natural result of getting concentration?
You can choose what you want to focus on.
No, your mind subdues.
Oh, okay.
Your berserk conceptual stories calm down.
Yeah.
Calm down, Andrew.
Yeah.
Literally, when you get advanced in it, and eventually you've completely subdued your conceptuality. And then when you've got single point of concentration, even to some degree, and you wake up out of your meditation, come out of your meditation, your thoughts remain subdued. Your thoughts remain subdued. And you can even see every tiny thought in your mind. You are in complete control of every single thought. This is insanity for our culture. We just assume a berserk mind is normal. So the fierce effort you've got to put into doing that in 2 or 3 or 4 years in the mountains is so unbelievable. You've trained your mind to such a degree of power and effort and discipline and clarity that you have complete control over your thoughts. So even initially, beginning to pretend to get concentration, practicing for 5 minutes every morning getting out of your head, already what are you doing? When you're watching the breath for 5 minutes, you can't help but hear the crazy thoughts, right? You can't, can you? They're all there, aren't they? Whereas before, we sort of vaguely noticed, but didn't notice till they came out the mouth. Now we're hearing them. They say one of the signs of success of doing even accomplishing the first of the 9 stages of concentration is you think you're getting worse. So the thing what's happening is you're noticing, you're watching your breath, but you can't help but hear the crazy thoughts. That's the benefit. So because you hear the crazy thoughts, you go, my God, look at the jealousy, listen to the anger. You're observing. And then in your daily life, you bring that skill to bear, but suddenly your thoughts you become more aware of your thoughts now. Then that's what you have to do to become your own therapist.
So by doing that exercise, you become more aware of your thoughts throughout the day? Is that kind of
That's what I'm saying.
what I'm hearing? Yeah.
You're developing the skill, in concentration meditation, you're developing the skill to stay on one thing.
Yeah.
Normally our mind just gets absorbed in whatever pops up, and we're 99.99% blind as bats and don't notice it. Are you?
Yeah.
So then what you're doing is
Yes,
stepping out of your head for 5 minutes and
Yeah.
watching the boring old breath, and you think, my God, these crazy thoughts, I can't believe it. But they've been there all the time.
Yeah.
But because you're staring out of your head, you can't help hear them shouting. That's good. That's why I say the immediate benefit isn't just to make all the thoughts go away. So we think, oh, I had a bad meditation, my thoughts were crazy. I'm happy you see your thoughts, because they're going to be there all day. So now you bring the skill to bear while you're doing the dishes and driving the car. You're not just aware of the car, but you're beginning to become more focused because you've developed the focus to what's crazy thoughts.
Yeah.
And then you get better and better at grabbing them before they become emotional.
Yeah.
That's the skill. And you grab them and don't just go, oh, there's anger. But you argue with it. It's just a conceptual story. You're sitting there thinking, oh, madame, what's your wife's name? Forgive me. I forget. What precious
Sam?
girl? Sam, yes, Sam. She's sort of like your wife, but you're not wife yet, are you? But you're like a wife. Whatever you are, Sam, his friend. But instead of like in your head, well, you don't even notice this critical mind of yours, oh, Sam, this is Sam. That's practice. But we often don't notice what comes out the mouth. When Sam hears your words and you've got to hear them for the first time yourself, oh, that was called criticism. But hear it before it gets to the mouth. That's the skill, and that's what comes from focusing on something else, like your breath, anchoring your mind to the breath, the boring old breath, training yourself to stay there. That by training yourself to stay on the breath, you become sharp, you become alert. You can't help but hear your thoughts. That's good, because they're the drama. They're what we have to notice.
And
Do you understand?
slightly stupid question, maybe, follow on. You're talking about years for this to eventuate into something, but then...
Well, no,
from what
no,
you're
well,
talking-
eventually, okay, going to the mountains and doing serious Federer style work,
Yeah.
that's a different discussion. We're talking doing the tennis, a bit of tennis every
Yeah.
day.
But I mean, like you're talking about where you just hear it, like how long, or like a silly question.
What's that?
How long until you kind of can do what you're talking about? Like you just hear it, like okay, so if someone cuts you off in the car, you kind of catch yourself. Is that like within years, or is that
It
still
depends on
the
it depends on what you bring to you in this life. It
Yeah.
depends on what you brought with. I mean, I'm not a dumb answer. It's just a necessary answer.
Yeah.
Depends on how much work you've done before.
Yeah.
Depends on you can meet a 15-year-old who's a genius tennis player because she's done it before in a past life, so she comes more quickly. So it's up to what you've done before and how intelligent and how capable and how brave you are. Some people with the delusions are really strong. We can't even hear our own thoughts. Still keep blaming. So it depends on a question of our mind, you know. And that's where we every time we do notice, delight in your progress. You understand?
Thank you.
Robina, can you just discuss a little bit about the role of memory and what it plays in our concept
You mean
of
the
an
ability
inherently-
to not forget what you're doing from moment to moment? That one.
Well,
Or you mean
the one about,
remembering something from the past?
well,
you mean?
no, the role that it plays
In meditation.
No, the role that it plays in our belief of of an inherently existent self.
What do you mean? Sorry.
Well, like, why do we actually believe that we are inherently existent?
Oh.
Is it because we are able to reflect past memories of ourselves and that we've done certain things?
No.
No?
It's just, no, that's a very interesting question. Goodness me. Wow. The reason there's any, okay. One of the ways karma ripens, one of the 4 tracks of karma is habit. So that's the answer, really, habit. So if you practice anger lots of times, and you haven't purified it, you get born in this life from the time you're a baby, immediately your attachment doesn't get what you want, you're kicking and shouting and yelling and demanding mummy's breast. That's called anger. So the habit. So the habit of ego grasping is the deepest habit that informs all the other habits, and that's why it's there. Because it's completely primordial, completely instinctive, because it's the most primordial and it's the deepest habit of all that informs all the others. That's the end. It's a habit. Just habit. Does that satisfy? Is it an answer?
Yeah.
And the point is, every second, because everything we're thinking and doing and saying now is informed by that viewpoint, but it's so subtle we don't notice it. It's so subtle we don't notice it. You understand? It's so subtle we don't notice it. And that's why at the very first level you control your body and speech and abide by the laws of karma and purify your mind. So you're removing some of the obstacles. Then you get to high school and start looking into the growth, the root, the branch delusions, the voices of ego grasping, attachment, anger, and all the others. Being your own therapist. You need to purify even more. Now when we get to this one, and now that you talk about it, let's get to it. Now we begin to look into and understand the functioning of ego grasping, the deepest one, the hardest one to see. But by understanding karma, that's the first example. Karma is an example of the first level of dependent arising. So dependent arising is the logic that proves emptiness. So by thinking about karma, it already loosens the grip of ego grasping, for sure. It puts us into the center of responsibility of my experiences. The ego pathetic view of self-pity is I'm an innocent victim. I have no role in my suffering. I have no role in my happiness. It's all about you. Do you understand? So by thinking about karma, it puts us in the center and makes us become accountable. That already loosens the grip of ego grasping. It loosens the grip of that deep delusion. Next level, you go to high school and you start looking at the other delusions, the branch delusions, attachment and anger and all the rest. Because they're the main voices of ego grasping, by learning to see how they are embellishments, like we've been talking here, that begins us, then these two prime us to now, when we hear about ego grasping and how it functions, and how it believes in an inherent me, we're already primed to be able to do that. So let's just do that now, based on what we've talked about. So the deepest cause of our suffering, the most primordial, what's your name? I forget.
John.
John, okay, sorry. The deepest, most primordial cause of our suffering, the root of it all, which we're leading to, is this primordial misconception, delusion in the mind, and it's labeled ignorance. But like all of these words, they're defined very precisely. So the colloquial term, which is very tasty, for this ignorance is ego grasping. ego grasping, I grasping, self grasping. Is this primordial misconception. So in the way that, for example, attachment is a misconception insofar as it exaggerates Ed's deliciousness, and aversion is a misconception in the sense that it exaggerates Ed's ugliness once he leaves me, then ego grasping, which informs both of them, is a misconception about the very status of delicious Ed, ugly Ed, for example. So as Lama Zopa says, all these delusions, the root one and the gross ones, the branch ones, all function in this way that they decorate on top of what is there, layers upon layers upon layers of characteristics that just aren't there. So attachment, an easier one to see, we learn in high school, exaggerates the deliciousness of the chocolate cake. Ego grasping, which is informed and comes along with that attachment because they're joined at the hip, one is the expression of the other, is exaggerating the very ontological status itself of delicious cake. We believe, it causes us to believe that delicious cake is an inherent, intrinsic essence of the thing on the plate. So attachment exaggerates the deliciousness of the cake. Ego grasping exaggerates the very status of delicious cake. And in both cases, they each think the deliciousness, attachment thinks the deliciousness is in the cake. Ego grasping thinks there's a very actual thing there from its own side in the cake that's intrinsic cake, intrinsic delicious cake. So, the one that's the most tasty, of course, is to look into how this ego grasping exaggerates, embellishes the nature of I. So Buddha says, the universe consists of trillions upon trillions of phenomena. Phenomenon, object of knowledge, established base. Phenomenon, object of knowledge, these are all synonyms. Existent, they're all synonyms for that which exists. So whatever the mind can cognize is that which exists. So as we've been talking before, some of these conceptions in our mind are cognizing something that doesn't exist. So delicious cake on the plate that'll make me happy, that is not what's existing on the plate. That's attachment's fantasy. What is existing on the plate conventionally is indeed a chocolate cake. It's not a carrot cake. That's a conventional truth. But attachment embellishes its deliciousness and gives it the role of making me happy, such that when I put it in my mouth, happiness is triggered. So attachment's a liar. There's something valid there. There is a chocolate cake. But attachment is a lie you build on top, which embellishes the characteristic of delicious cake on the cake. And we know that's true, because after 4 pieces, now it looks disgusting. So now disgusting cake is the object of another state of mind called aversion, that then decorates on top of the cake ugliness. These are embellishments. That's the key function. So the same with, so then everything has a status. Everything exists, a conventional reality. So Khapa says the best way to think about ultimate reality, how things exist ultimately, emptiness, is to think of them in terms of the dependent arising. Dependent arising is the king of logic, Lama Yeshe says, to prove ultimate reality. And of course it sounds abstract to us. It's true to prove what really does exist. And why do you want to do this? Because once we have removed the lies from the mind, we are now in sync with reality, and that brings bliss and happiness and freedom from suffering. And then compassion as well, on top. You add that on top. That's the purpose. So, a phenomenon that does exist is a chocolate cake, a plate, a chocolate cake, a vase, a cup, a table. There are trillions of things. We see this, new conventional phenomena. They are objects of knowledge, their existence, and there's a million trillion of those, and we're inventing new ones every day. I always think of Steve Jobs. Pre-Steve Jobs, or after Steve Jobs, got about 4 trillion new phenomena since he invented, iPads and iPhones. Look at the trillions of apps alone that only came because of Steve Jobs. So with our clever and intelligent, attached minds, we create all these new phenomena that we never heard of before Steve Jobs. So there's a conventional phenomena. So you establish the conventional phenomenon, like I said about the cup, you have to define it, you have to establish it, so we know how we're talking, so we can then begin to see how it exists ultimately. So it has to be on the right track. So we've discovered this is called a cup. The definition is flat bottom clay container that holds my tea. We get to all agree upon that, we establish it, we prove it by pouring the tea, etc., etc., and there are other things to do to really prove it, but then we've established there is a thing called, conventionally, a thing called a cup. So now, in that framework, there's a thing called an I. Clearly, we are examples of that kind of phenomenon. We're not a toilet. I mean, we treat ourselves like that sometimes, or each other. We're not a microphone, we're not a cup. We're a person. So the word person, I, self, me, myself, they're all synonyms. So a dog is a person. A Buddha is a person. A hell being, Buddha would establish such a being, is a person. Okay, so if this ego grasping embellishes every phenomenon in the universe, then we should look, they divide often the way that we perceive the I in one particular way and then every other phenomenon. So we have to discover the emptiness of the I and the emptiness of other phenomena. But the way they all exist ultimately in this view, from the Madhyamika Prasangika view, the view that our lamas teach us, it all comes to the same thing. So let's look at the phenomenon called I. So if delusions in here are embellishing the qualities of an I, let's look at that. First of all, the gross delusions. Look at attachment. If you're really attached to you and you think your body's the ant's pants, you've got the best body in the world, the best hair, the best ears, the best feet, whatever it might be, the best intelligence, that's an embellishment. You're embellishing. You're over-exaggerating, so they become attached to it. We become attached to it. Now we can see we've got aversion mostly to ourselves. We love to hate ourselves. We think we're ugly and fat. No matter how much we look, we're always dissatisfied. So we have aversion also to me, to my ears, my legs, my breasts, whichever piece of me, the bits and pieces of me. We have aversion for them. We can see that. So embellishing their ugliness. Someone else thinks you're gorgeous, you're adorable, but you think, they love your breasts, but you think they're horrible. Too fat, too big, too thin, too small, too up, too down, whatever. Do you understand? You all know this. You all know this. You understand? I mean, one lady, this is where it's really extreme, and it's good to have extreme examples. This one woman I remember reading on one of those television shows, how the Americans do it, maybe the Australians do it now too, where people have sort of extra fanatic, weird things they do, So this one lady, little skinny little lady, American, she had like 400 triple Z breasts. I mean, whatever the measurement was. You understand? Do you understand my point? In other words, she was completely, and this is what attachment is. We call it compulsive, what do we call it? All these terms? Obsessive, compulsive, something, all these words, right? These are all functions of attachment. One is the berserk, out of control, like Justin talked, endless creative nonsense, never stopping, never stopping. One is over-exaggerating the deliciousness of something. One is just the endless chatter is the major one. But this one, you get obsessed about certain things, you get obsessed with the shape of your hand, or we can see this. So this is an extreme example. She was absolutely obsessed with her breasts, so it's also a function of dissatisfaction. So she get another enhancement, whatever the polite word for breast growth is, I forget. Enhancement.
Enlargement.
What?
Enlargement.
It's enlargement, is it? Okay. So she'd get one, and this was over the years. So then the moment she got it, so that's what attachment does. You're all anticipating, all excited, and it's going to make your breasts better, you're going to get them enlarged. Then she gets some new diet, and she gets all better, all the stitches heal, looks in the mirror, and she's dissatisfied again. Not big enough. So she has another enlargement. And she got to the point where she had such enlargements, nobody in America would give her any more. Even in Mexico they wouldn't give her any more. And so she was in constant agony. I mean, she called them her friends. She lived obsessive, and this is, to hear extreme examples is really humbling because we all recognise it. We're not that obsessed, that's all. So we talk about attachment being attached to drugs, and look at the consequences of that. But this we just think is funny, but it's the same problem. Attached to drugs, never satisfied. Attached to alcohol, never satisfied. Attached to sex, never satisfied. Attached to killing, never satisfied. Attached to your breast, never satisfied. It's the same problem. It's called attachment. Over embellishing their importance, and when you do get what you think you want, then you're never satisfied, so you want more. So that's it, as my mother used to say, the more you get, the more you want. I'd hear that. I'd blow my mind. The more you get, the more you want. That's the pain of attachment. So the point I'm making out here is how it embellishes. So the point, that was just like absurd, this poor woman, she had to lie down all the time.
Wow.
She was obsessed, my friend, she said, she thought of them day and night. That's just an example. That's how attachment works. Embellishing, exaggerating.
But was she happy with them that deep, or was she feeling, oh no, like...
No, that's my point.
Yeah.
Never satisfied. That's my point. That's my point. Let's see, attachment thinks, finally I'll find it somewhere, that some size will make it perfect. Of course she was not happy. That's the whole point, darling. That's the whole point of attachment.
Yes.
The more you get, the more you want.
Yeah,
This is the point. But we always believe the next one will do it. The
Should we
next boyfriend,
signal
the next piece of cake, the next moment, the next thought, the next anything. We're obsessively thinking the next thing will do it. That's the maniac of attachment.
Should we sing the Rolling Stones?
What, darling?
Should we sing a song like I Get No Satisfaction?
That's right, exactly. So listen, I have to keep going, okay? So what's your point, Suzanne? Say it, darling, go say it.
Is that similar to, like, I always look forward to something?
That's right, attachment. It's attachment.
Yeah, I was like,
That's
I'm
attachment.
looking forward to this
That's
happening
right,
next
that's
week
attachment.
or next month.
That's
or-
exactly right. So we're looking, it completely runs our lives, and because this is attachment, we've got to get to ego grasping yet, but attachment, it often is benign. It just feels like normal life, looking forward to things and making plans. It just seems normal to look past and think of all the future past. It looks normal to want another meal, a better meal. We don't think it is, but it looks benign, but it's like a nightmare. So this is pervading everybody. So this is the key point I'm getting here is how the delusions embellish. So how does ego grasping embellish? This is obviously more subtle. So this ignorance, they call it ignorance, Buddha calls it ignorance, I don't know what the term in Sanskrit is, but in Tibetan it's ma-ripa, unawareness. But it's like double trouble ignorance. Excuse me. Regular ignorance is merely not knowing. And if we had that, I think we'd get enlightened in a year or so. I wouldn't be surprised, we're very intelligent. So if you say, what's that? And I say, oh, I don't know. That's ordinary ignorance, isn't it? And you just simply tell me it's a cup. There's no obstacle in my mind to hearing it. I hear it, I now know what a cup is. We would get enlightened in a second if we knew, if our ignorance is like this. But the ignorance that we've got is the nightmare. It's like you've totally believed it's a peanut, like we talked before. I mean, that's a silly example. You not only don't know it's a cup, you think it's something else. And you are totally attached to believing in that fantasy. So we really be precise here. This ignorance, this root ignorance, not only doesn't know the actual status of myself, it does not only doesn't know, what happened to Sam? She went to sleep.
He's sitting over there.
Oh, you're okay. So what, I suddenly saw the absence of Sam, that's all. That's okay. Don't worry. So not only do we not know the actual status of things, how they actually exist, not only do we not know that, but we have made up the complete opposite of what exists. So Buddha says, simply, everything, the ultimate nature of everything, and it always sounds abstract to us because it sounds negative, the way things finally exist is that they possess no inherent nature. There's no intrinsic I there. Just hear the words. Ignorance believes there is an intrinsic I. Ignorance believes there is an intrinsic microphone. Okay, we don't know what that means. We've got to look into it. Ignorance believes there is an inherent microphone. Ignorance believes there is an inherent I. And what Buddha's saying is the reality is the exact opposite. So ignorance not only doesn't know there is no inherent I, ignorance believes there is. So so if we merely didn't know what the I was, someone could tell us and we'd learn it and we'd get enlightened. But we not only don't know its true nature, ignorance has made up a complete fantasy that's absolutely diametrically opposite to the truth. And we have been clinging to that lie for eon, Buddha says. And that lie gives rise to attachment, aversion, and the other 83,997 mental illnesses. And all realms of existence. So, let's look at the lie. We have to look at the lie, the misconception. The lie of attachment is that that is over-embellishing a quality of the cake that doesn't exist. So ego grasping is also over-embellishing the status of an I, the status of I, which doesn't exist. So that's more subtle, that's what we have to look at. There's different levels of dependent arising. Dependent arising is the shorthand for how things exist conventionally. Emptiness is the shorthand for how things exist ultimately. And they are both the flip sides of each other. So the powerful way Tsongkhapa says, praising Buddha, the best way to understand the ultimate reality is in the context of conventional reality, because they're not separate. So at the moment, he says, we have the two extreme views. Whenever we hear, there is no I from its own side. Whenever we hear, there is no intrinsic I. We can't hear it in a more nuanced way, so we think, well, there's no I, might as well kill myself. And we fall off into the abyss of the great mistake, and we become nihilistic. We even say, well, everything's empty, so it doesn't matter anyway. That's completely mistaken. It's way more nuanced than that, and that's the worst mistake when we read about emptiness. And we can be forgiven for hearing that because our minds aren't attuned to the subtler meaning. So then when we hear dependent arising, Buddha's saying, well, there is an I that does exist in dependence upon causes. There is a mug that does exist in dependence upon parts. There is a microphone that does exist in dependence upon this or that. When we hear there is a mug or is an eye or is a microphone, we go to the other extreme and we go, oh, thank God, grasp. There is something after all. So we either think there is something which is an over-exaggeration and embellishment of the status of something, and they call that eternalism, or grasping at things as permanent, or grasping things as inherent, or here we think there's nothing. So we go between these two, we sort of go like drunken sailors between these two extremes. And even emotionally, without knowing these concepts, we're doing that emotionally. When we're full of attachment for something, I've finally found happiness. Ed and I will be together for eternity. I have found the perfect happiness. Everything is perfect now. I found everything is perfect. That's a complete insane exaggeration of the reality. You've gone nuts, you lose your mind. So because it's a fantasy, it's not real, we believe in it 1,000,000,000%, then when he leaves me, the bubble will, and then the more extreme I came, the more extreme in my fantasy, when the bubble bursts, which it must because it's not real, the more I collapse into despair of nihilism and think there's no light at the end of the tunnel and want to kill myself. So emotionally, we are like this, up and down like yo-yos, bipolar supposedly. We're all bipolar. I'm not joking. It's a question of degree. Because bipolar is all excited and up, everything's perfect, which is eternalism, and all down and despair, which is nihilism. Emotionally we recognise this, up and down like yo-yos, out of control. This is directly coming from this ego grasping, directly a consequence of ego grasping. Well, some of these two truths, philosophically speaking, we have to understand them. It's putting explanations to these neuroses that we have, you know. So, the very first level of dependent arising of I, the phenomenon called I, is karma, cause and effect, powerful. I remember my philosophy teacher, Geshe Tekchok, when we were discussing this, when I first studied with him years ago, he used the example of the phenomenon called Robina, which is obviously why I remember it. You see my point? It's clear. But he said, it can be said in terms of causes and conditions, cause and effect, the law of cause and effect. It can be said in relation to that phenomenon that from everything in the universe up to the first moment of Robina is validly a cause and a condition for the existence of the phenomenon called Robina. And this is logical. You start trying to find, you start with a cup. What's the cause of this cup? Well, the person who first had it in their mind. Then you go back with all tracking with that person. Mrs. Smith, who conceptualized this cup, it did not come out of a tree. Some human conceptualized it. That person had a mother. And Mrs. Smith would not have existed without a mother, and that mother couldn't exist without a previous mother. And so you go back for eternity, back to find the first mother, you won't find. And you go back to finding the first piece of flesh that caused the body of Mrs. Smith. You go back for eternity, you're not going to find the first moment. That's just the person whose thought invented this cup. And you've got the cup itself, got all the parts, the clay, the this, the that. Where'd that clay come from? This piece. Where'd that come from? That one. You keep going back. So it's not a joke to say everything in the universe is validly a cause and condition for the existence of this cup. You do it analytically, you'll see it's true. So that loosens the grip of inherent cup. So then the second one, which is still not the major mistake, this is just a philosophical position that the Buddha says has been kind of created, but it's a good example, and I think there's some semblance of truth in this, how we grasp it ourselves. Our language expresses this one. We really believe, this is the second level of dependent arising, that I, which is the name, is actually the name we give to these parts, isn't it? This is the second level of dependent arising. That every phenomenon is made up of bits and pieces. So cup, first of all, exists, the first level, in dependence upon causes. The second level is cup exists in dependence upon its parts. You won't find anything here that is cup, because cup is nothing other than all the coming together of the various parts. So let's look at the person in the same way. I. So we believe, and our language expresses it, that there is among these parts, and this is the parameters, isn't it, of I. It doesn't include this, it includes this. It doesn't include this, it includes this body, and it includes the mind that informs this body, consciousness. So they're the parts, body and mind, speaking simply. We believe without question, and our language expresses it, that there is among these parts a special part, a boss part. They say it's like a landlord or like a puppeteer, like a head salesman. And that part is called I, and that part runs the show. We believe that with absolute certainty. Every word we say expresses that. I did this, and I said that. And then the self-pity one, you did that to me, how dare you harm me. We talk this way. And the sense of I is vivid, loud. It's like a little mini me in there that's running the show, that's vivid as can be. And Buddha basically says, don't be ridiculous. That's a complete embellishment of I. Conventionally, there is an I. But as soon as we say that, we think, there must be something there. He doesn't mean that. He doesn't mean that. We can't help but hear it. But we can still state conventionally there's an Robina in this chair. But this ego grasping causes us to embellish that the existence, the status, the ontological status of that Robina, and over-exaggerate her status and give her this special status, and she's a special intrinsic little thing in there that is the puppeteer that runs the show. That is the owner. This is very clear. Is the owner. Robina is the owner. I have a nose. There's the owner and the owned, isn't there? We believe this, and we don't question it. We don't question it. So this is a really good analysis to do to show how ridiculous it is. So one of the arguments they say in the text, you have to, if we're trying to look at what exists and what doesn't, and what exists and what doesn't, there's one of the arguments you use, the logical arguments to look into this, is that if you do assert something as existing, there's got to be one thing, and there's either one thing or there's more than one. It sounds a bit odd, but we'll discuss it. You look at it. So, this ego grasping causes us, like I said, to truly believe, and we talk this way, that there is among the body and among the mind, which are the parts, we're going to establish they're the parts here, Buddha's view, the parts of Robina are the body and the mind. And we can see that the body has many parts, and the mind has many parts, has many thoughts, many feelings, many emotions, virtues, non-virtues, eye consciousness, ear consciousness. There's millions of parts of my body, and there's millions of parts of my mind. They're the parts that make up Robina. We know this conventionally. But what we do is this ego grasping embellishes the status of that Robina and gives it more power, more status than in reality it has. So what ego grasping believes, like I said, in this grosser level, and it's not the subtlest one, that somehow in there somewhere, among these parts, is this very special part called I. So, okay. I was just an example. It's a really good one. So let's establish what exists and what doesn't. So I can tell you I have a cup and a lid. A cup and an iPad, okay? Keep it simple. I have a cup and an iPad. So if you look over here you've heard the sound, you came from here, your eyes look in this direction, and you'll quickly want to verify what I said. We all want to verify what a person says. That's why words are really important. So you'll be very relieved to know that I made a correct statement, isn't it? Well, you don't know it's not a Samsung, but I'll tell you, there's an Apple, look, see? So it's an iPad. So I will make a statement. I have a cup and an iPad. Now, without any analysis, that's a valid statement. isn't it? Valid. I do have a cup and an iPad, but we have to analyse it now. We have to pull it apart. And this is a simple argument. This is a simple argument. What time is it? Okay, this is a simple argument. So if there's either one thing or more than one, so if I made the statement there, so phenomena that exist, if think of the mind as the subject, always cognizes phenomena which are the object. There's always something that the mind cognizes. The mind cognizes objects. And I like to put it like this, they kind of cognize nouns. So objects, a noun refers to an object, doesn't it? A thing, isn't it? A thing, an apple is a noun, isn't it? Or even, yeah, you can say even actions, but never mind, here it's nouns. So a cup is one object, do you agree? Cup is one object. You agree with that?
Yeah.
And an iPad is another object. And the first one I mentioned is a pronoun, Robina. Would you agree?
Yep.
I. So that's three phenomena. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
It's really obvious, isn't it? And if it's a true statement, you'll be relieved to see you can point out a cup and an iPad, and this is the point now, and a Robina that are separate from each other. Do you accept that? Now that implies here that they don't depend upon each other for their function. These are massively important words, depend and function. These are huge in this discussion about emptiness. Do we accept? And that means if the cup breaks, the iPad is still intact, isn't it? Because they don't depend upon each other, do they? Do you understand that? It's really true, isn't it? There's no dependent relationship at all. That's an example. There's no dependent relationship at all. iPad can break, cup is happy. Robina walks out the door, both are happy. Do you understand my point? This is evidence, and that's proof that at a conventional level, there are three separate, independent phenomena. Well, I will tell you another statement, that I have a nose and a hand. 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 That's three phenomena, isn't it? I, the pronoun, nose is another one, and hand is another. That's three, you agree it's three nouns? Three nouns? So we have to find three phenomena, don't we? Don't we? Three phenomena that are independent of each other. Logically, conventionally, to prove it's true. So I have a foot, I didn't say foot, no, nose and a hand. Here's a nose, right? It does not, for it to do its job of blowing snot or breathing, it doesn't need a hand, does it? Do you agree with that? It does not need a hand. Hand to hold the thing does not need a nose. Do you agree with those two things? That's really simple, isn't it? So they're independent. In this sense, they're independent of each other. So now there's a third phenomenon we mentioned called I. So that means we have to find a phenomenon that is called an I that doesn't depend upon a nose, that doesn't depend upon a hand, that doesn't depend upon a knee, or anger, or jealousy, or the other millions of parts that make up the I. Do you hear that? So we believe there is. And what's the proof of that? What's the proof that we believe there is? If you insult my nose, say it's a really ugly nose, I will say, how dare you insult me? Won't I say that? So, and you'll say, but no, I didn't insult you, Robina, I insulted your nose. And that's a valid statement. But look, your nose doesn't feel hurt, does it? We say, I feel hurt. Do we not say that? So it's like there is an I in there that feels hurt, isn't there? And we believe it. I mean, all our modern psychology assumes it. We haven't quite located what it is yet, but we all assume the presence of it. And Buddha says this is ego grasping's job. It has made up a fantasy separate I. It's made it up for 20 million trillion eons. And we've been believing in it since beginningless time. So he says we have to argue with this because it's not true, he says. He says the Hindus went as far as they could go. They're the best in the universe. They went as far as they could go, eliminating all the other rubbish. But he says they still clung to some subtle essence, some Atman, some self. The Christians call it a soul. The Greeks call it an essence. And Buddha would say no. And even in the Buddhist views, the different views, and I'm talking Buddhist views here, there's different views of asserting some kind of status. The one that's called the Madhyamika view, the middle way view, the Prasangika view, is the one that is said to be the intention of the Buddha. And that view says there's not even one atom of anything in here that has an independent status of an I. But when we hear that, because we assume the whole of me is the I, or there's an I that's the owner, they're the two mistakes, we assume, oh, well, I'm disappeared like a puff of smoke, there's no I. Wrong view. That's nihilism. And this is the part that's really hard. So to hear it in the right way is not easy. So we have to, start, just practice and start. So let's again say a bit more of this one. If there is a separate I in there, then this is the point. We say, you insulted me. But strictly speaking, that's implying there's a vague notion there, there's some kind of I there that got insulted. We don't analyse it. Or there's a vague notion that all of this is me, and somehow by insulting one part of me, you insulted all of me. So either one of those assumptions is there, which we have to analyse. But the simple point is this. As Kyabje Zopa says in his lam-rim commentary, we know that there is a relationship between I and the nose. Because when you say I am hurt, it's a true statement. But if we do this first analysis, if there were an I that is the owner of the nose, that's two things, right? So we have to locate what is it that's I in here that isn't the nose and all the other bits. And he says you won't find one. You will not find one. You will not find a piece like that. It's a fantasy we made up. The other point is, we then think, oh, well, all of it's me. Because all of it's me. My knee is me, and my eye is me, and my nose is me, and my pee-pee is me, and my eyelids are me. Well, he says as many of those things, that can't be possible either. Because why would you say, oh, I have eyelids? Why would you say, oh, I have noses? No, you wouldn't say it, if it was truly you. Why would you just like saying, I am I? I have I. How silly. So there's a simple argument to prove there can't be an I that's separate, that is the owner of the parts, and there can't be an I that's oneness with the parts. So what the hell is the I then? Buddha says. Well, honey, it's the subtlest one. It's merely a name. It's a name. It's a name we give to the parts. And you can't pin it down. It's like annoying. It's like frustrating. You're just playing, these yogis are playing tricks with us. So this is the subtlest one. So as Lama Zopa says, when we've really realised the meaning of there is no intrinsic I, it's as if there's no I. But there is. Dependent arising. There is an I, ha-ha, but what does exist is so subtle, it's as if it doesn't exist. So to put these two kind of annoying statements together, when we realise there is no intrinsic I, it's as if there's no I, but there is an I, but it's so subtle as if it doesn't exist. This is a perfect way of saying this view. And so this is coming from the yogi's experience. So we can take it as a given, we can accept it, we have to try and kind of keep this in mind so we have this balance. Never become nihilistic and never become over-exaggerating. And it gets ever more subtle. Our understanding gets ever more subtle. And this is what leads us, finally, to the middle way, when these two come together. And when we understand dependent arising, we know it means emptiness. When we understand emptiness, we know it means dependent arising. That's when in the right track. That's right. To always understand emptiness in the context of dependent arising is the perfect way to never lose the plot, you know. So these are the words. Of course they're the words. Start with words, you know. Got to start with words. It's a classic way we learn everything. So if there were a separate I, if there were in here a little mini-me that owns the parts, I mean, to some degree you can see if I'm attached to my iPad. It's true, technically, the existence of my iPad does not depend upon Robina. But if you're attached to it, this is the point, attachment thinks it's an extension of me, doesn't it? That's why we're pained when my iPad breaks. Because attachment believes it's part of me. That's exactly what it does. It over-embellishes. But still, technically, we can agree that an iPad doesn't need Robina for it to function. That's something we can prove, isn't it? Because it's separate from me. It's independent. Well, that's what we think, first of all, about the I. There is and our language says, I have a hand. Well, it's two things, an eye and a hand. I have a nose. And if you do the analysis, there's a really good meditation, they say. You literally go through in your mind in a very rigorous way. Justin, this is how you can use your creativity, baby. In a conscious, intentional, disciplined way. But just run off into fantasy lands. It demands concentration. You start to analyse all the parts. And then you do this process of elimination of the parts. Looking for that secret little mini-me in there that's hiding somehow. That's been running the show all this time. And you will end up. Now this is the interesting point. What we think, first of all, the naive way, the nihilistic view of emptiness is you'll keep throwing out the parts and they'll be all piled up in front of you and you'll end up with nothing. That's how we think of emptiness. That's a complete mistake. That's a complete mistake. You won't find an I that's separate from the parts. But what you will recognise is not no I. You'll recognise the absence of the fantasy I that you thought was there. And that's a massively different phenomenon to understand. And that's what that takes time. So if there were a little mini me in there running the show, which is a really gross example, if there were a mini me running the show, then it's true that if the nose gets hurt and the eye is separate, just like here, the iPad and the cup aren't affected by each other if they break, the same, the eye will be looking on at the nose getting hurt, but the eye wouldn't feel anything. The eye is separate. Oh, the poor nose, I feel so sorry for the nose, look at that. But no, we say, I am hurt. So that's actually valid. But we exaggerate, we distort the eye, because if we think it's separate, but if it is separate, it wouldn't feel that way. So it proves there is a relationship, a dependent relationship, between what we call I and the nose. But it's much subtler than we think, you know. This is the type of analysis we have to do, things like this. So another way to talk about this, another way to talk, is in terms of things, emptiness of phenomena. The eye gets so tricky because it's so close. But it's really fairly clear when you come to the subtlest meaning of emptiness, which is that everything exists in dependence upon the mind calling it that. It's really evident that, you know, we give everything a big status. We give everything a status. So an object, like I always think of a prison. I know from going to American prisons, certainly, and some in Australia, they're usually some are nice. Australia, they're better looking, the ones I've been to. But in America, they're kind of really pretty gross. Some are nice, but some are pretty gross. So I would say a definition of a prison is an ugly place where you're sent when you're naughty or thought to be naughty and you can't escape. That's definitely true. I'd say that. So conventionally, that's a fact. So what's a cup? A thing that holds your tea. It's a fact. A prison, an ugly place where you're sent when you're naughty. Okay, not in Norway. The further you go north in Europe, the nicer they are. So I had a friend of mine on email. He was in Norway. He was really looking forward to his 2 years in prison. Because he was going to get education, get therapy, it'd be the best environment, he didn't have to spend any money, he'd be totally taken care of, he couldn't wait to get to prison. That's not how people feel in America, I think. And probably not here either. So anyway, so that's all. That's proving my point. So, in America, let's say ugly prison somewhere. So that's a conventional truth. It is usually ugly, let's say, and you can't escape. That's true. Tick the boxes. Tick true. But what we see, what a grasping does, it over embellishes that reality. It over embellishes that reality. Conventionally, it is a cup that does hold my water. Fact. But ignorance over embellishes that and gives it this inherent status that is existing. The cup that holds my water is in the cup itself. It's coming from the cup. It's coming from the cup. No, Buddha says. It's coming from the mind. So the point is this. If you've never heard of a prison, and you're in Norway, and you hear about there's a free room in a prison, well, you'll line up to go there, won't you? You wouldn't ever think it's a prison. It's going to feel nice. You'll be happy. You never heard of prisons. You never heard, even if it's a poor prison, an ugly prison. You've never heard of prisons. You're just happy to sit there and get your dinner every day. You're content to be in your little house. You don't want to escape. And you're not going to think it's a prison. You'll be happy there. So this is the point. Prison is conventionally true. It is what it's stated to be. It does function. It is ugly and it functions to keep you locked in. It does that. It's function. The cup functions to hold tea. It's true. But we've given it that meaning. That meaning is true, but it doesn't come from the cup. It comes from our mind imposing it on that thing, and then we believe into it and buy into it, and then make the mistake of forgetting that we called it that, we labelled it that, we gave it that status, but we forget that and then think it comes from the prison itself. That's the victim mind. That's the dualistic mind that you're grasping. So that's why that woman in prison, I always quote, I haven't mentioned it this time, I read about this woman on death row years and years ago. I've mentioned the story many times. In the 70s, this hippie lady with a hippie husband, hippie kids, gets picked up by two guys hitching. The two fellows stopped by the police. They kill the police and blame the hippies. So they're on death row in Florida. They're like worse than animals because they kill police, right? They're completely innocent. Completely innocent. She loses the children. husband gets executed. You can't even imagine the nightmare. I mean, look at the accusations we get, and we can never let go of the pain, you know. Well, can you imagine that nightmare? Utter nightmare. She did yoga and stuff. She did yoga and things. And she said at some point, I realised I couldn't change anything. But they couldn't take my mind from me. And this is absolutely bullseye, exactly Buddha's point. I'm not saying she was a Buddhist. This is truth. Buddha didn't invent it. But she was clever enough, intelligent enough to see it, I would say. So she said, I decided I'm not a prisoner, I'm a monk. I'm not in a cell, I'm in a cave. So right there, she changed her interpretation of that nightmarish environment, that nightmare and rage and despair of being accused of murder, and she didn't do it. She changed her way of seeing it. So consequence, she became happy. Now we call that fantasy. You think, oh, that's fantasy, she's crazy. No, just being common sense, intelligent. Because it functioned. She was able to function to see it as a place where she could work on her mind, and she did. So that was, it was for her, it became a beneficial experience. But if you have anger and rage and despair, and it's not fair, I don't deserve it, how dare they do this to me, which is normal in this planet, we suffer so badly, then we go crazy. She was able to change her mind, and this is the essence of the entire Buddhist path, from here to enlightenment. And this is proving emptiness. There's nothing intrinsic in anything. Not an atom. Which doesn't deny it's still called a prison. It doesn't deny that it still functions to keep you locked up. Which is able to reinterpret it differently. So that's one. So the other point is to prove this is true. To prove this is true. If this lovely building in Norway that looks like a pleasant country house is actually a prison, then you wouldn't, just by looking at it, you'd say, oh, there's a prison. If it were intrinsically a prison, you'd say right away, oh, there's a prison. It would be evident to you. It would show you. As Lama Zopa used this simple, all Lamas use this simple example, like like a $10 bill. In reality, conventionally, it's an oblong piece of plastic in Australia, isn't it? There's a kind of weird art on it. Pictures of the Queen or somebody. Well, that's not $10, no, he's on the $10. So it's obvious that in and of itself, what it is a piece of plastic with a 10 in the corner and a bunch of writing on it. That's conventionally a fact, isn't it? It's conventionally a fact. It is conventionally a piece of oblong plastic with a number in the corner and a few pictures on it. It's that. But look at the meaning we give it. Who gave the meaning? See, if that meaning of the value of $10 is that you go get $10 worth of something, that's the meaning of money. If it were that in the bones of the plastic, if it were that in the money, from the side of the money, if it were that in the plastic, then just by looking at it, never having thought of money in your life, you'd know immediately that that's what it is. You'd know its meaning. But it's proof we don't. And everything in the universe is like that. We make everything up. But they nevertheless still function. They said the great yogis in their meditation, completely absorbed in single point of concentration on the reality of the absence of inherent me, totally absorbed. And then they come out and they bop out of their meditation, bop around life, seeing everything out there like an illusion, knowing they have no intrinsic nature, not being fooled by them. But nevertheless, when they pick up their cup, it does exactly as we defined it. It holds your tea. Nevertheless, it does function. So these two seem like contradictory, but they're powerful to hear them. There's nothing on its own side, but it still holds my tea. And that's the point we have to realise. But we give too much meaning to it. We've got to keep stripping away the power we give it. Not be nihilistic. Because when you really understand these two, the more you understand emptiness, the more it leads you to understand dependent arising. And the more you understand dependent arising, merely functioning, the more it tells you emptiness. These two absolutely are together. That's when we begin to be on the right track, Tsongkhapa says. And why, like John's question, it's because we've been doing it for eons. It's just the deepest, most primordial habit of all. And once that's the point about how you can prove what's true and what's not. If it is a lie, you've got to prove it. You've got to annihilate it with the truth. And that's the interesting point. This is how they talk about, okay, another discussion here. There's time for tea, isn't it? Yes, it is. Don't have tea. Have tea. And more scones, more cakes, more things. What's for tea?
Not that fancy this time.
Oh, darn. Go have some tea, okay. See you in half an hour. Then we'll finish. And listen, someone did talk about refuge. I mean, I'm not saying you should or anything, but was anybody else thinking about taking refuge and lay vows? Was it interest of anybody? You did what?
Can you retake it?
Retake. Yeah, okay. So then we have to, so then, okay. So we'll finish. What?
Sorry, we're having a little discussion.
Sorry.
What?
Apologies. Yes, I do.
Okay, people wanted. Okay, so I think we finish the class. We'll do whatever we're going to do at 4 o'clock when you come back. And then I can either talk about refuge and lay vows during the class, or if we have other things to talk about, we'll talk about those and you can all go if you want to, or we can, and then we can do the refuge and lay vows after that. Won't take long, those who want, who's already familiar with it. We can do that, or we can just make it part of the class.
Oh, there's a question from online.
Yes. What is it?
Could Venerable Robina please talk more, it's from Vicky, more about how celibacy assists one to further one's practice and development on the path?
Okay, when I get to refuge and lay vows, I'll just mention that as a secondary topic here. I will do that, Vicky. And remind me if I don't do it, would you please remind me about it?
Yep.
Okay. Thanks, Vicky. Any questions about emptiness that we discussed recently? Yes. Anything? Go.
This is about karma.
Yes, darling. Go.
So, working with infants and young children.
What's we done?
Working with infants and young
yeah,
children.
that's right. Yes, okay.
Many of whom are Aboriginal. I suppose I find it difficult to hold in mind seeing their suffering, but also
understanding karma.
Yeah,
I understand.
Particularly because of the genocide that's happened in this
Exactly.
country. Yeah.
I know. So then karma's so you want to understand karma better.
Yeah, and I had a chat to someone in the lunch break, which was helpful, and they were saying, recommending that I see the baby as myself, and I've probably been the baby thousands of times before, but I don't know if there's anything else you can add.
Okay,
I'm sure
it's just, just theoretically, tell me how you understand karma. Just tell me your understanding. What is it? This philosophical view of the Buddhists, what is it?
So that through our actions we create merit, and we can create negative or...
okay, so keep it simple.
Okay.
Everything we do and think and say, we leave seeds in the mind that will produce future results. You get that concept?
Yeah.
And negative actions will produce suffering. And positive actions will produce happiness. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
So then, look at the world. Can you see some people who are happy? Who have lovely houses, happy babies, money in the bank. You see that?
Yeah.
And good health. You're one of those.
Yeah.
You've got a nice family. People treat you nicely.
Yeah.
Some people abuse you, maybe, that's okay. But generally speaking, you're fairly fortunate. Would you agree with that? Well, the simple explanation is that that's the fruit of your virtue. Do bad things happen to you?
Some.
Things? Okay, so they're the fruit of your non-virtue. So where's the problem? With that?
In the past, and also perhaps a little bit in this life.
What?
Well...
Where's the problem?
In me.
No, just the problem in that expression, that meaning of karma. So where's your problem in trying to come to terms with when you see people who are being abused? Where's your problem?
That I'm not appreciating what they've brought into the world with them.
What? Sorry, darling. You said you had a problem understanding people who've got suffering. You mentioned a group of people. Okay.
I feel guilty.
Okay, I'm not interested in your emotional feelings. Let's be technical here. This is a technical. It's like mathematics.
Yeah.
We're talking mathematics here.
Yeah.
Just pretend it's like a system. It's like an explanation of something. Forget the emotional component. So if you take we're taking as a hypothesis here, because we're not clairvoyant yet, if we're interested in the hypothesis, the Buddha says everything that anyone ever experiences is a fruit of their past actions. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
So anything that's called suffering is a fruit of actions like that we've done in the past, that we have created, that are now resulting in our suffering.
Yeah.
And everything that's called happy is a fruit of our virtuous actions that is now resulting in happiness. So now where's the problem with that? When you see, forget which the group it is.
Yeah.
Any group of people on this planet, you see them suffering. So why is that a problem for you? What is it you can't cope with? When you hear that simple explanation of why it's happening, where's the problem for you? Where's the problem in putting that together?
I'm not sure exactly.
Well, good, you have to look at it then, don't you?
Yeah.
Because you asked the question.
Yeah. I think it's maybe meditating more on what you said.
Well,
actually.
meditate, just think about it. Can you hear that as a hypothesis?
Yeah.
Can you hear, like you've never heard of botany? Let's say you've never heard of botany.
Yeah.
And then someone tells you that everything in the garden that's called veggies is the fruit of a seed you planted. And everything in the garden that's called weeds is the fruit of a seed you planted. Well, then it's not surprising, is it? You see, oh, that must have planted a seed, what a drag. So when you see people suffering, who are abused, tortured, harmed, raped, insulted, homeless, it's the fruit of past actions. And when you see the opposite, it's the fruit of past actions. So where's the problem with that? What is it you can't handle when you hear that? What arises in your mind when you hear that? What makes you nervous when you hear that?
I think because I've got such a reverence for Aboriginal culture.
There's no contradiction. I completely have reverence for Tibetans, for Tibetan culture.
Yeah.
There's no contradiction. Tibetans were all accepted that due to their past negative karma, they're now being shat upon by the Chinese communists. Their country is destroyed. More than 1 million people have been slaughtered. They continue to be killed. They continue to be tortured. Their country is destroyed. Dalai Lama's in tears when he hears the destruction to that country. Every mineral has been ripped out of the guts of the animals are starving and being killed and slaughtered. The country is destroyed. Tibetans know that. They're all happy guys.
That's actually really helpful.
Yes.
To have that compassion.
It is.
Yeah.
It's terrible. And the trouble is, because we have a view in our culture, this is our problem. It's heavy. This view is heavy for us in our culture. Because why? Because we have a whole series of other views that say, if bad things happen to you, you don't deserve it. And if good things happen to you, well, we don't think about that one. But, you know, we're kind of not sure. We just think, okay, take it for granted, give me more. But so we have a view already, a very deeply ingrained philosophical view that any suffering to innocent victims is unfair. Do you understand? So that's the view that's preventing us from hearing it.
Yeah. Understand.
That view prevents us from hearing it. And it's heavy. If you say this to the West, you know, a bunch of people start being a culture that's being slaughtered on this planet is the fruit of their negative past actions, then it's terrifying to us because it's opposite. It assumes they must be bad. Because an innocent victim for us has to be innocent. A victim has to be innocent. So if you've done nothing to deserve it, then it's shocking to us, and that's the view we have. So I mean, that's a very hard view to get past. So then people who are in that group, whatever group it might be, of being slaughtered and harmed, if they have the view that they didn't ask to get born, and they have the view that it's not fair, look at the Palestinians and the Israelis. You take whichever position you've got there, you're going to have full of rage, despair, how dare these evil people harming us, taking our country, and each of them blames the other. This is what happens. And if you're in any poor country anywhere, you're going to blame the people who do it to you. And it's true. This is the point. It's true. Australians, white people have definitely done appalling things. As a group of people came onto this country, said no one belonged to it, took it themselves. These are facts.
Yeah.
These are facts. The Chinese went along and took Tibet. That's a fact. But Tibetans happen to have an explanation for why.
Yeah.
So this is what we're going to try and think about.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, see what it really does, and we haven't talked about the compassion wing at all, when we have that view, and that's exactly the Buddhist view, when you really do have the view from yourself, from your own point of view, why you're suffering and why you're happy, then you start to have compassion for yourself and realise you have to stop creating more suffering. So you stop killing, stop lying, stop stealing, because that's the cause of why bad things happen. So that's because of yourself. And then you look at the world and go, oh my God, look at the world. So you've got to have compassion for the groups who are being harmed, but you have even more compassion, in a way, for the groups who did the harm. And that's very weird for our mind. So the groups, any dog, that dog being beaten now is the fruit of its own past action. So by the very being beaten, it's just finished that karma. And the person beating them is just created new karma to suffer in the future. But we don't have that view. It's just like it's a bizarre view for us. And we hear it, and because also, mostly because we hear karma as punishment and reward. So it's absolutely shocking to us. It's a shocking concept. We can't bear to hear it. And we think it contradicts political activity. But you Tibetan, worth their salt, is a political activist too. It doesn't contradict.
Yeah.
My friend, this Jigdrol, in 87, in the first kind of mini uprising in Tibet since 59, and all the young monks and nuns were the radicals. The young monks and nuns were the radicals. They're the ones demonstrating, you know. So when we hear demonstrating, we hear anger and rage. No, not for them. Because they just know that it's true. They have a reason why it's happening. They know the view of karma. That's internal. They don't ever say, why is this happening? How dare it happen to us? Because they know the reason. But they can still see conventionally it's not appropriate. Just because you know that you planted a weed doesn't mean that weed has to sit there. See, we have the view, well, I mean, if they created the cause, why are you trying to change it? That's nihilism. That's like saying, well, there's a weed there, but I planted it, so why should I pull it out? That's kind of weird. Just because you planted it doesn't mean you shouldn't pull it out. You see my point? But we have this view that somehow if you're innocent, I mean, it's so complicated, our view. We complicate it. So we think, well, if they cause their own suffering, why are they demonstrating against it? Why are they just lying down and getting more suffering? It's like saying all the weeds are in the garden, why should I pull them out? How stupid. Weeds are dragged. You planted it, what a fool. I better pull it out and not grow more. That's the learning. So Tibetans know that. So all this is my friend Jigdral. He came to, he was arrested in these demonstrations in 87, got tortured. And then he was tortured, then he was released again, then he demonstrated again, then his friend had his head blown off in a demonstration, so he thought he'd better escape this time, so he came to Nepal. And he was telling me the story, and since that time his father murdered, brother murdered, and he was sad, tears. And then I said to him casually, I always tell this story, "Geez, do you ever get angry?" And he laughed. He said, "Angry, what fault? It's our own fault." Now those are heavy-duty words for us. We can't even hear those words. It's like so heavy and tortured and outrageous. But it was like as light as a feather, because all he meant was it's karma, Robina. But we can't hear that. Even as Buddhists, it sounds heavy, you know. So it's a very, very, very different philosophical view. A very different philosophical view. So having the view that you created the cause for what's in your garden doesn't mean you don't fix your garden. So we think because we're innocent victims and we don't deserve anything and it happens unfairly, then you're allowed to be angry and to destroy the naughty people. But if I deserve it, then I deserve it and it serves you right and go and get more suffering, please. That's our view. It's very heavy. Do you understand?
Yeah.
But darling, you know, when you're working with people who happen to be a group who are suffering, if you have the view of karma, think about it yourself, then you have even more compassion. Because we created it ourselves.
Yeah.
And the suffering is we don't think we did. We think we blame everybody else.
Yeah.
So Tibetans are fighting the Chinese for their freedom. That doesn't contradict the fact that they know they caused it. Therefore there's no anger. It's quite powerful.
I realise that.
And very hard to get. Very hard to hear.
Yeah.
That's why those young nuns, I always quote that story, tortured by the Tibetans, and this prisoners that Richard Gere invited to New York, this group at the time, the Dalai Lama was there in 2003, invited me as well, some people who worked with people in prison. There were like 20 former prisoners, all of whom had done some kind of meditation in prison. And they were sharing their experiences, met the Dalai Lama. It was a wonderful time, and he invited 2 young Tibetan nuns. Same scenario. I mentioned it. Who had been tortured and sexually abused in prison in Tibet. They were telling their story. It was evident to the Americans. They weren't angry. That's weird to us, you know. Because they're not saying, because anger is, how dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. That's what anger says. It's a philosophical position based on believing you didn't ask to get born. It's very powerful. They didn't have it. They're sad, tears coming like Jigdral, suffering. And they said, and of course, we had compassion for our torturers because we knew we must have harmed them in the past and because we know they will suffer in the future. So karma informs your compassion. It increases compassion. It's a very different view, but like anything, you've got to think it through. There's a whole set of conceptual constructs that are quite different from the materialist one and quite different from the Christian one. We've got to think it through. It's not the same as karma. Not enough to say that. You've got to know botany. You can't say, oh, it's botany. How's it work? I don't know. What good is that? You know the nuts and bolts of it. So I just think about it. But meanwhile, there's a sentient being there. And this is the point, when you have the view of karma, it's like a given. You don't go on about it. You just then see person suffering and you help. That's it. That's what you're doing. And it's true. Every word is this conventional reality. It is conventionally true that white people who came along destroyed the black people here, destroyed their culture, destroyed their country. It's absolutely true. But we don't have a reason. Whereas we know it's just swapping roles. Yeah. So next life you get born as an Aboriginal, next life you get born as white. You've got egg on your face. I know when I first heard the teachings, the karma was the one that was most powerful in my mind. I remember Lama Zopa's words. I didn't understand 99% of them, I promise. Not because his words weren't clear, because I didn't understand the concept he was talking about when I first heard the Dharma. But I kept hearing the word karma, and I knew I liked it. And somebody said it's cause and effect, and I was somehow very happy. Well, I know it was one of the most powerful ones for me, because at the time I was a radical lesbian separatist feminist. Not just feminist, radical feminist, not a radical but lesbian, not a lesbian but separatist. Before that I was a radical black politics, supporting all the Black Panthers and everything, and before that was a communist, before that was a hippie, and before that a Catholic. All these different groups, you know, looking for truth, everywhere I was going, looking for truth. And then I bumped into these lamas, you know, and about time they said to me, you should look at your mind. It was a brand new idea to me. But I remember it was really intense going to the first course at Chenrezig. I remember my first course there. And because 10 years before that I'd been a hippie. I'd gone past all these torturous, like communist, feminist, all this dramatic, intense politics. I was a full-on 100% political activist, not on the outskirts. Even when I was a radical feminist, even I was cynical about the women who had a husband. What are they sort of feminist? You're pathetic, you know. I was a serious, full-on, serious feminist. Are you hearing me, people? I was serious. I mean, serious. When we all lived on Amazon acres, the woman I was having a relationship with, Karen, she bought this property up north of Port Macquarie somewhere, and she called it Amazon acres. We women lived there. Not even a boy. If you had a thing between your legs, you weren't allowed to be there. We're really strict, serious, radical, lesbian, separatist feminists. What I'm trying to get at is, I had a very serious view. And before that, I had a previous serious view. Before that, a previous serious. And my point is one thing, I'd been a hippie at the begining. That was gone like a million years before for me. And I suddenly walk into Chen Raising and there's a bunch of bloody hippies. I could not believe I mean, I felt like I'd gone back 10 years. I could not believe these hippies. There are 200 of them. And the women called themselves ladies and couldn't carry the buckets of water because they were ladies. And the men ran everything. I could not cope. I can't describe to you the culture shock, the serious culture shock it was for me. You know? I'm quite serious. I've been so immersed in whatever I did. 100% political activity, you know. Anyway, whatever. But I knew, part of me knew it was what I wanted. It was knew I belonged. It was knew it was my path. It was really torture, really extreme, really difficult. So what I'm getting at is, because I was so seriously a feminist, I decided by now that I couldn't hate half the human race anymore. You know, it was a major step I knew I had to make. So I went to this course with all these men there, and the other thing was I saw Lama Yeshe. I loved Lama Yeshe, and he was a male. It was really hard for my mind. You've got to understand me. I was serious, you know. It was really quite shocking for my mind. So there's one about I was a female, right? And hearing all these teachings about males and females and hear everything, and the monks sitting in the front row. It was intense for me. I can't describe to you. But when I really began to even think about karma, all my political activity before, all the philosophical views I had about groups over here who are suffering and the group over here is doing the causing of the suffering. That was the view I had as politics, you know. And then when I heard this, it dawned on me, well, guess who made me female? Guess who caused my suffering? Guess how come I got raped and held up with guns and abused by my father or whatever? Guess who caused that? Me. There was egg on my face. It really hit me for the first time. And already, I mean, it's still taken years later to try and work with it. But realising if I created my cause to be who I am, then you just stop blaming other people. But it doesn't mean you stop political activity. Keep trying to help other people and see it as outrageous. It is wrong. The Tibetans, what the Chinese communists are doing to the Tibetans is wrong. The Tibetans know they caused it. Weeds in your garden are wrong, but you caused it. No contradiction between those two. Then you try to fix it. It was huge in my mind. I'd caused it, so stop complaining. It was huge. And that's the implication of karma. But don't chuck the baby out the bathwater and think, oh, well, it doesn't matter, then you've got to suffer. No, you can pull your weeds out anytime you'd like. That's the point, you know. We hear it nihilistically. Because the assumption we have, if you're in a group that's called suffering, you have to be an innocent victim. That's why the Palestinians are so enraged, and that's why the Israelis are so enraged. They each think they are the victims, innocent victims of these other monsters. Are you hearing me? Mm-hmm. This is the view. This is why there's so much rage. There's so much rage. You get any Palestinian who has been victimised and is caught by the Israelis, and they have a valid story. You get any Israeli who hears the Hamas say, we don't care if it takes 1,000 years, we're going to annihilate all Israelis. They do say that. But these two groups believing they are victims, that's the nightmare. That each of the group has got nothing to do with their suffering. That all these monsters do this to me. That's how victims think. Are you hearing okay? Yeah. So it's very hard to come to some concept, to come to some conclusion that actually you have played a role in your life. That's the intense one. That's the point about karma. Wow, that's such a shift to make in the mind, you know. Then you might still fight for your rights, as Israelis still go and fight for their rights, Palestinians still fight for their rights, but not coming like the Tibetans, but not coming from rage and innocent victim and blame and it's not fair and poor me. This is the part that sounds heavy, but this is the point, you know. You understand? And you don't go on about it. You know, oh, that you're a poor suffering person because you created the cause. No. You just help. Be kind. Be compassionate. You understand? Any other questions? No? About emptiness?
If you have realization of emptiness,
Yes.
does that mean you don't have any ego grasping?
No,
at
ego
all?
grasping, you've cut it. You've proven with truth that it's a complete fantasy that you've made up. And so the thing that it believes in, the inherent I, which doesn't exist and never has, you now know it doesn't exist. So then you've cut the root, therefore you have no longer any fear. You've got more work to do, but you can't fall back after that. And so you've cut the root, therefore there's nothing to be attached to, nothing to be angry about. The other the branch delusions are cut as well. The root delusion is gone, the branch delusion is gone too. And that's the part that's hard to hear, because the delusions are the root of why we suffer. They're based in fear, they're frantic, they're painful, they're neurotic, and they're liars. When you've cut the lies, then you can't fall back after that. You've literally burned the root of all suffering. You've just got more work to do, that's all. And then bodhicitta to do as well.
And does compassion comes with it automatically?
Okay, let's think about that. Okay. If you're just on the wisdom wing, which would be the Theravada Buddhist path, the Buddhism you've learned in Burma and Thailand, that's the wisdom wing only. And that, according to that view, mainly beings only have the potential to achieve their own nirvana, their own cessation of suffering. So you basically graduated high school. They say some people have the karma to have the bodhisattva path, but not many. Whereas the Buddhist view is, the Mahayana view is, everyone has the potential to become a Buddha. That's a difference. There's one difference. The other difference is this: that so if you do the high school one, you do junior school, you live in vows, abide by the laws of karma, you purify your mind, you do all your practices. Then you go to high school, you start to control. You get control over your mind, your delusions. Then you realize emptiness. So you do all the way. You get in meditation years and years, and you then finally realize emptiness. Then in one life or other, once you've perfected that, because you've got more work to go, so the first moment is just the first moment, then you have to perfect it, kind of strengthen it, and then at some point in one life, you've achieved this liberation, you've cut all the roots and all the dramas. So then think about how you would be if you were like that. You've cut the delusions, but what's left is only love and virtue and compassion and kindness and bliss and happiness and joy and empathy, because they are those. Speaking simply, we could say the virtuous states of mind are at the core of our being and can never be destroyed. So once you've removed the pollution, they're enhanced brilliantly. You'd be a blissful, amazing person. There's no question about that. Do you understand? So what happens though, because for life after life after life, your motivation has been, I'm going to graduate at high school. Your motivation is to get out of samsara, renunciation, realize emptiness and get the hell out and don't come back. That's your motivation. On the way, you develop this love and compassion. You can't help it. This is natural because there's nothing in the way anymore. The goal is to get rid of the rubbish and then to get the hell out. That motivates you. So when you get to that point, then when you die, your love and compassion override. Your bliss, which is intense, and your motivation override your love and compassion, and you disappear into space, and you become you remain in this subtle state of bliss, subtle non-manifest state of bliss. The Theravadins actually, there's one of the major differences in the Buddhist teachings in the world. They would say you disappear altogether. There's not an atom of your mind left. They would say every atom of you disappears completely. And Dalai Lama laughed one time and said, we Mahayanas have a problem with that. Because the Mahayana view is the mind never ends. But they say delusions and the mind go. That's a very different view. But the Mahayana view would say you go to a subtle state of bliss, the fruit of all your hard work, and it lasts a long time. And then Buddha comes along and taps you on the shoulder and says, okay, honey, so get out of your nirvana now and come back onto the Mahayana path and become a Buddha and help others. So you would be blissful and compassionate, but that overrides anything else, and you go into bliss. Whereas if you're on the Mahayana path, your goal is Buddhahood. So even though you get to a point where you don't need to come back, you want to because of your motivation. Your motivation overrides your bliss, and you keep being reborn, so you can bop around connecting with sentient beings and creating infinite more merit and getting bodhicitta and becoming a Buddha. So on the Bodhisattva path, you enhance billion times more strong that love and compassion. Do you understand? That's the point.
Thank you.
The main cause for people achieving nirvana in the Theravadan tradition is their fear of suffering.
Recognize that's renunciation. Finding suffering disgusting. Yeah, absolutely. That's the point I'm saying here all the time. The wisdom wing is for our own sake. Yeah. Compassion will come as a byproduct. The emphasis is to, that's what I'm talking about here with cells, the emphasis on self knowing your own suffering is revolting, you're sick of it, and that forces you to want to fix it. And that empowers you to then practice living in vows, not harming, and it empowers you to want to purify, and that empowers you to get rid of delusions and to get the hell out of suffering. That's the main motivation. Compassion and stuff comes as a byproduct, a bonus. But that's not what's driving you, not at all. That's the point. It's to help yourself, which is profound. Then when you look around, if you're on the Bodhisattva path, and you realise, oh my God, we're in the same boat. How could I possibly leave? And then you start enhancing the compassion. It's a very different emphasis. Do you understand?
Yep.
Robina, can you please elaborate on that part where you said you're abiding in bliss, and then like Buddha would come and like tap you on the shoulder? Like, I know you don't mean like literally, but
Okay.
and say
Okay. So mind is not physical, right?
Yeah.
So right now we're embodied, aren't we? And every sentient being who's in samsara is embodied in one way or another. So a dog is embodied with this very big hairy body, right? Lions have got a body. We've got a body. Our 4 elements manifest according to karma in the shape that we have of our body. So we're all due to past karma, because the karma, the actions we create impact upon the elements, and that determines the body we get, the life we get. So some tiny beings got tiny bodies, haven't they? There's all the 4 elements. We've all got mind and the 4 elements, and then due to karma, that manifests as a certain kind of body we get. So you've got spirits who we can't see with our eyes, ghosts, types of beings. They've got the 4 elements, but they're manifesting as air energy. Their mind is conjoined with air energy. They're spirits. Hell beings, you could argue, their minds are conjoined with fire energy. So these elements are natural. So our minds are conjoined with these 4 elements. That's how they talk in the Vajrayana. So mind itself, though, is not physical. So when you've highly realised, you've got renunciation, you practice the first scope, you control your body, you're living in vows, you then go to the next level, you become your own therapist, you got shamatha, you then use that powerful state of mind to get rid of the delusions and eventually realise emptiness, right? So then you cut all the roots of all the rubbish. You cut the cause of having a body. Because bodies, all kinds of bodies, are the result of some karma, you know. So you cut all of that. So you're pure. So then when you've finished in that particular life, you've perfected and you've achieved your nirvana in this girl body, let's say, in that life you've accomplished it. When you die, if that's been your goal, your consciousness remains in a subtle, unmanifest state of absolute bliss, which is the nature of mind. It's the nature of mind when it's unencumbered by all delusions. Bliss and happiness and joy are the nature of a mind unencumbered by delusions. That's a natural state. You stay in that state of bliss, and the length of that period is due to the amount of karma you've created.
I guess it's just really hard to...
Can't be louder.
It's really hard to actually understand subtle unmanifest.
Well, can you hear the words?
Yeah, no,
just conceptually comprehend. Just conceptually think. There's a consciousness that's gone beyond delusions. There's no longer a need for a bag of bones. No longer attachment. No longer aggression. No longer anger. No longer ego grasping. No longer a self. This consciousness is beginningless and endless. The Mahayana would say. So there's subtle. Of course, we don't accept that because we only think of the brain. There's this subtle state of pure, subtle consciousness in the nature of bliss. That's it. Those words you can make sense of. We've got to get used to the concept of Buddhism that mind is not physical, that's all. So when there's no delusions left, there's no reason for a body. That's the only way I can say it. And then what metaphorically they say, that bliss is very powerful. And then one time somehow it'll begin to weaken because it's karma still, the result of karma, sort of like that. Buddha will come along, as they say, tap you on the shoulder. Okay, stop wasting your time in bliss. And manifest again in bodies and get onto the Mahayana path so you can become a Buddha and help others.
So that abiding in subtle unmanifest bliss isn't enlightenment?
No. That's the first stage. Liberation from suffering, yes. But enlightenment has to add the compassion wing as well.
Okay, so you can hang out there and then need to continue on the path because you haven't developed.
Yeah, but the Theravadins say you're gone. They don't say you're in a subtle state of bliss, they say you've disappeared from eternity.
Right.
The Mahayana would say that's a nihilistic view. So they have different views in Buddhism as well. They all argue with each other. They only debate, politely. Are you clear?
As clear as...
I mean, as clear as you can be. I hear the thoughts. I know exactly, darling. I understand. I mean, it's all like science fiction. We have a materialist view. So listen, anything you want to say about emptiness? Let's think. I want to talk about refuge.
Yes.
The key point about emptiness is it's the same as we're talking all the way. our minds make up, our minds project all sorts of stories, and because we're doing it for so long, we develop that habit in the mind, we put our imprints in our mind, and that programs us, and we get a certain life, and we carry out those imprints, like lemmings, you know. So we just got to come through with our mind, and the key job is to distinguish between the neuroses, which are liars, misconceptions, and disturbing, between those, or distinguish between those and the virtues. This is conventionally speaking the job we have to do, is especially in high school. That's the real job, being a Buddhist. And that leads you then to go to the more subtle level, which in the Mahayana path is taught in the framework of the 6 perfections of the Bodhisattva at the end of the path. Or even though emptiness is a Theravadan teaching, emptiness is a Hinayana teaching, emptiness is a high school teaching. But it's taught in the context of the 6 perfections for the Mahayana path. But basically, when you're developing bodhicitta, you're also learning to meditate on emptiness, getting to a more subtle level and beginning to understand how the subtlest illusion lies to us, the ego grasping that clings, believes in, that embellishes the status of the self, embellishes the status of everything. So whether you say it's a prison, what ego grasping does is over-exaggerate the prisonness of prison. It doesn't mean it's not suffering. Don't think it's not exaggerating the suffering. It's true. It is a horrible place to live. It's a fact, conventionally. But the ego grasping assumes, it sounds so odd to us, that prison is in the bricks and the horrible guards and the barbed wire, and it's intrinsically a prison. And therefore, because we have that view, we assume I don't have a choice but to suffer. We buy into our own stories. We don't think we have a choice. It's concrete. So we do this to everything. Like a person says they're a carpenter. Look at how we over-embellish that status of that person. You ever see that person? Oh, there's a carpenter, you say. Or there's a rapist, we'll say. Or there's a murderer. I mean, we have this view. We over-exaggerate it gigantically as if everything in that person is murderer. But there's only one part of them that's a murderer. One time my friends in prison, the ones who kill people in gangs, that's what you do as a gangster, they're not psychopaths. They happen to kill somebody. Some of them, it was like even accidental sometimes. But they're called a murderer. This is a really obvious example. When you think of people in prison who are murderers, oh my God, he's a murderer. I can walk up and say, hello, I'm Robina, I'm a murderer. I don't think so. You'd be terrified, because you see the whole of Robina as a murderer, wouldn't you? We do that. We define, oh, there's an Australian, there's an Aborigine, there's a Chinese person. We embellish, it's really obvious. We paint the whole person with that one brush. We do that. That's what ego grasping does. We embellish, we exaggerate, we overstate it. That's why we say, I'm a bad person. That's guilt. It's just not true. You're not a bad person. I remember one time with Lama Yeshe, I was all full of self-pity, moaning about how hopeless I was. And always Lama Yeshe just said things out of the blue. It was like a lightning bolt from the sky. It was sort of radiant and amazing. Every time he said something, it blew my mind. And this one time he always just said it like in passing. I had to grab it before he went away, And this one time when he heard me moaning about myself, he said, nothing wrong with your heart, dear. It's just your behaviour. So all I'm meaning is, I think I'm a bad person. No, it's just the way I behave, not even my body, with my speech. But because it upset people, and I'm wanting to be loved like everybody, attached to a good reputation, then you think I'm a bad person. It's exaggerating. Every delusions exaggerate. So I'm a carpenter. It's a fact. But if you like carpenters, you love carpenters. Like you're a Sydney Swan. If you see Buddy. And that's why the poor Hawthorne people had panic attacks 6 years ago when he left the Hawks, isn't it? I mean, all those children in tears, tearing up their Buddy Franklin Guernsey. They were in love with Buddy, and suddenly becomes a Sydney Swan. I never forget on the Age, the big front picture of Buddy in his red and white. It was like panic attack with the Hawks. Do you understand what I'm saying? Panic attack. He's suddenly a Sydney Swan. The poor children were tortured. These little boys with whatever number Buddy has, I forget the number. He got the same number in the Swans.
23.
What is it?
23.
I'm sure. I thought it was 35. 23, okay. He got his 23 number. Can you imagine those little kids with their, because he's so charismatic, you know? He's so powerful and so handsome. He's like Bambi. He's amazing. You can't keep your eyes off Buddy. Have you ever seen Buddy play tennis? Football? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
Yes.
Yeah.
No.
He's amazing. You can't keep your eyes off Buddy Franklin. He's just, isn't it true? It's true. Have you watch?
Yes.
Oh, witness in Hawthorne, I did.
You're a hawk. Oh yeah, it must be painful for you, right? Exactly.
Gotta let go.
He's joking, but he's not. But if you take the swans and the hawk's jumper off him, you just see Buddy. I mean, even this week when two of the swans all resigned, I saw it on I watched it on the AFL. 4 of them resigned, 4 of them retired, you know. So there's poor old Hanbury, one of our old guys since he's 5 has been a swan, but he ended up joining St Kilda because he couldn't get enough work at the Swans. And so there he is in his St Kilda Guernsey, being with the Swans. It looked so painful. I thought, what's he doing in a St Kilda Guernsey, you know? Because he's a swan. This is how it is. So we exaggerate the status, and then we become attached to it. And then we have aversion. I mean, are you mad at Buddy? Or are you kind of joking?
No.
It's painful, because especially if he's so handsome and gorgeous, and he's the best goal kicker, the best forward, they have the best everything. And enjoys another team. I mean, it's like the worst divorce possible. It's like Ed living for the most best girl on the planet. It's too painful. This is how delusions function. First we believe he's an inherent hawk, an intrinsic hawk. In his bones he's a hawk. And then suddenly, and then you're attached to him. Then of course it must be torture. That's exactly how delusions work. We over-exaggerate. So we see the whole of Buddy as a hawk. And now we see whole of Buddy as a swan, you know. Both are just these labels. They're true. He did play for the Hawks. It is true he does play for Sydney, but we give it more status than it has. You see the point? And then we become attached to it, or aversion. We do that. We paint the whole thing like a carpenter's the whole of him. You know, he probably spends an hour a day being a carpenter. A murderer. It was one event in one place, 1 second, a person died, but the whole of him forevermore is a murderer. It is clear what delusions do. They exaggerate. They over-embellish the status of something. That's how ignorance functions. So we over-exaggerate the very I. That's it. Over-exaggerate our Australianness, my femaleness, my bigness, my fatness, my smallness, whatever labels we use for ourselves. We over-exaggerate them. We either think them as ugly, or worse than they are, or better than they are. We never get into the truth. It's always embellishing one way or the other, you know. That's how delusions work. We recognise it. And this one of overstating the status of the person, that's the ego grasping one. And then on the basis of that, you're attached to have aversion. So you over-exaggerate chocolate cake. Chocolate cake. You over-exaggerate it. And then hanker after it and think it's divine. And then when it stuffs you full, you over-exaggerate its ugliness and disgustingness and you want to vomit now. We never get it right. We're swinging from pillar to post like maniacs, you know. That's what delusions cause. No wonder we're all crazy. And they're all liars. They're all liars. And they're ancient habits, ancient habits, ancient habits. We never get things right. So one of the really good examples of the way they practice, you know, is like you learn to not just go, I'm angry, I'm jealous, I'm kind, I'm a carpenter. When you're looking at your mind, you get into the developments that the Tibetans do. You say, well, there's anger. There's love, there's kindness. You identify the state of mind, you see its function, and you attempt to recognise is it a delusion or a virtue, and you're more objective about it. You don't go, I'm angry, but there's anger. I'm kind, there's kindness. It's more precise, you know. And the other one is this. Okay, anyway, the story about Lama Zopa, how he nearly drowned when he was a little boy. I'll always tell that story. It's very helpful to describe this one. He was about 8, would have been about 54 or something, and he was born as a Sherpa, and he was recognised as a little boy before that as the reincarnation of the previous yogi called Lama Yeshe. We're going up there next October. That's the plan. So anyway, he was recognised, and so as his sister, I was supposed to do Lama Zopa's biography. I haven't really started yet. I'm getting a bit nervous because I'm getting old. You know? I promised 7 years ago, but I must do it. At some point I will. But I remember interviewing his sister. And like since he's a little girl, since she was 6 when he was born, she said, but since he was tiny, he always behaved slightly different from everybody else. Was sat on the box, would eat his food separately. Whenever he played games, he made mud pie dorjies and mud pie bells, and always talked about his benefactors coming. He talked about being this person, this Laudo Lama. They called him the Laudo Lama. This cave up there where they used to store the radishes. And he pulled the last Lama, the previous one, he pulled the radishes out and moved in. So he's like the radish Lama, you know. So anyway, every time Lama Zopa's mother would turn her back, Zopa's gone. They always find him plodding up and crawling, you know, they didn't have nappies then, they didn't have nappies, probably had bare bottoms, crawling up the path to where they know the cave of the Laudo Lama is. So she drags him home, you know. And then when he starts to talk, he's walking up there, come home, no, that is my home, he'd say. So he acted like this is who he was. He sort of, that's how his behaviour showed. And his memory, when they're little, their memory is very clear. So anyway, because he was behaving the way he was, she checked with the local lamas, they do their divinations, and it came up that he would seem to be the reincarnation of the Laudo Lama. So then eventually he was handed over to the monastery and they're given their manager. They say like that, their manager, literally, is H. And he's up at this one monastery above where he lived, Rowaling or something, and he told this story 8 years later. And he said, there's a big river. Actually, I heard him say the story recently, it was quite different, the take on the story, so anyway, this is how I remember it. There's a big river, and it's very, if you've been up there, it's very, very rough, isn't it? The water's really powerful in those rivers, it's very strong, you know. And they have these rickety bridges, these kind of wire bridges that move and wriggle, you know, they're a bit scary. So anyway, this particular bridge didn't even have a side on it, because he decides he wants to go and see these particular people on the other side of the river, pale-faced, with straw-coloured hair and pale eyes. They sound like zombies, don't they? White people. He'd never met white people before. He wanted to meet them. So he can't go empty-handed, so he brought his bowl of potatoes, because that's their staple up there. And he's walking on the bridge to go to see these people, and he falls in the water. So he's drowning, and this water's intense. And they don't teach him, you know, swimming up there. So this is how he told the story. He said, the head, not my head, the head, kept coming to the surface for air. And he said he could see his manager running on the bank having a panic attack, you know, losing this little tulku. So anyway, he said, after the head would come to the surface for air, and so what you would have seen is a little boy struggling for air, absolutely. But then he said, the thought occurred to me that the person known as the Laudo Lama, not I am about to die, you didn't know the word drown, he said, the person known as the Laudo Lama, the person known as the Laudo Lama is about to die. Then he said to himself, while he's struggling to survive, but his mind is clear, know anything about emptiness, meaning in that life he'd never heard it, but we can deduce from his behaviour and how he's talking with crystal clarity, this is logical, that he had realised emptiness in a past life, and you can't lose that. So this is the consequence of it. I didn't know anything about emptiness, but there was no fear. So what you would have seen is a little boy looking like coming up for air, which we assume means he's having a panic attack, which Mr. Darwin told us we have to have fear when we're threatened, because then we know what to do. Well, Buddha says, don't be silly. When you've got fear, you make a mess. You need intelligence to see what's going on. So he had intelligence. He observed that he was drowning. But because there was no ego grasping, because therefore was no attachment, he still went for air, but not out of attachment, just common sense. But he wasn't afraid. There was no fear. So we assume, we assume you have to have fear, instinct for survival, in order to survive. We think that. That's how we think. So we assume if you didn't have fear, then why would you want to survive? We think, therefore, you sink to the bottom of the river like a stone, going, oh, well, I'm drowning, what the hell? That's nihilism. No. He saw exactly what was going on, and this is the shocking part. He would have looked like a little boy coming up for air, which he was, but his mind would have been as clear as if he's walking on the road peacefully. He would have been super alert, but the mind would not have been disturbed. There is no ego grasping. There is no belief in an intrinsic I. Therefore is no attachment, no anger, no drama. That's hard for us to hear, but that's a perfect example. of what Buddha's saying we cannot accomplish. Are we communicating here? I find that story so powerful. And as you know, once we realise emptiness, as Lama Yeshe says, there is no fear. How beautiful, he said. I'm looking forward to it. So the point is this, though. You don't suddenly live in a panic attack of being a samsaric person, then suddenly in the next second you're liberated. It's a process. So you can enjoy, as you're progressing, controlling your body and speech, already you get less neurotic. And you continue to work on your mind and work on your grosser delusions, you continue to get less neurotic, which means more peaceful, more content, more calm. Calm, depending on your personality. I mean, I don't sound like I'm calm. I agree with you. I sound hysterical. I'm not saying I'm calm, but calm, we have a misconception, I think, of being walking slowly, kind of like nihilistic. Dalai Lama is exciting. I mean, it gives me a great enthusiasm, great confidence. Be like him, still be exciting and laugh and crack jokes and talk fast, but have a calm mind, because a calm mind means a happy mind. A calm mind means a virtuous mind. So there he was, with no fear, therefore no delusions, therefore no suffering. That's the point. How incredible. This is Buddha's view, but it's gradual. As you get more virtue, as you get less delusions, as you get more control, you will get more content. You'll become more peaceful. You'll become more steady. You'll become more able to bear the problems. Whereas now with all the crazy extremes, where it's like going from pillar to post, going crazy, you know, all excited one minute and despair the next. That's up and down. That's attachment and aversion, and that's how we are, you know. But we can change gradually. So there's plenty to look forward to, because we have this marvellous potential. You know. Are we communicating?
Yep.
So we exaggerate. Delusions embellish. To the point when you get rid of those embellishments, to the point where there's literally nothing in the eye that gives it its I-ness. Everything comes from the interpretation. That's the thing that's hard to hear. But nevertheless, there is still an I bopping around life, functioning, doing the job of being that I. There is not an atom of cup from its own side, but nevertheless it still functions to hold your tea. Is to put these two together is the real job. Because when we think there's no cup, we chuck it out, baby with the bathwater, no cup. When we think there is a cup, we over-grasp. So they're both extremes. Under-exaggerate, over-exaggerate. These two actually are same, they're the flip side of the same coin. That's when we start to think that even intellectually, we're on the right track. You'll be very happy. Yeah. This is the wisdom wing. It's got nothing to do with developing compassion yet. Don't even go there. But compassion and love, like I'm saying, are a natural consequence. But then on the bodhisattva path, you start to enhance those to an incredible degree of hugeness. That's the bodhisattva wing. Emptiness is emptiness is emptiness. The difference is the bodhicitta. So let's talk about refuge for those who want. And it's good to remind anyway. It's back in junior school. So given that you've got this precious human life we didn't talk about, and you don't want to waste it, then you think about impermanence, you increase your wish not to waste it, and then you think, whom can I turn to? And then you, no, not yet. And then you see all the likely suffering possibilities of different realms of existence. Thank you very much, I don't want that. Then you think, well, whom can I turn to? And here you're going to rely upon a good doctor. So the Buddha's our doctor. It's a good analogy. He's not our creator. He's not the boss. He's not a punisher. He's not a rewarder. He's a mentor. He's a wise person who, from his own experience, has methods which he used to help him get rid of suffering, for us to use to help us get rid of suffering. That's what Buddha is for us. A person who's done the job. How amazing. A knowledge holder. How marvellous. Guru apparently is something like heavy with qualities. We need a person like that. That's a fact. So we check it out on Buddha, we listen to his teachings, we see the examples of Buddha around, we read, we see, we get some confidence, you know, have some sense of what the Buddha is, hear his teachings, understand them to the best of our ability, and then we think we're going to formalise. We think next step is we just want to, for our own sake, for our own sake, to formalise this commitment. So you commit when you formalize your refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, you commit to a few things. So in Buddhism in general, they talk about commitment to do something and a vow to refrain from something. And the commitments and vows always said to be very powerful psychologically, like I've mentioned already about vows. So refuge would mean you're going to take refuge in, you're going to rely upon the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha. So Buddha is a name given to a being who's done this job of enlightening their mind, removing all the delusions and becoming perfected. So they talk about absolute Buddha, relative Buddha. Absolute Dharma, relative Dharma. Absolute Sangha, relative Sangha. This is not complicated. Absolute, like this point we said before, about mind not being physical, and that's just the mind we described before, was the mind of a being who's achieved liberation, not Buddhahood. But so there's the absolute Buddha, as they call it, would be the actual, unmanifest, all-knowing, all-compassionate, all-powerful, all-pervasive consciousness of a Buddha. You can't see it, taste it, touch it, smell it. And because consciousness in its nature, is not physical, then it can't be confined by space and time and matter. I mean, of course it's abstract for us. The best we can do is talk like this. That's actual Buddha. But what good is that to peanuts like you and me? We can't contact it, we can't access it, So out of immense compassion, all the beings who have become Buddha, who are this unmanifest, all-knowing, all-compassionate, all-wise consciousness, manifest in bodies that you and I can see and hear and access. That's the so-called relative Buddha. And that for us is Mr. Shakyamuni Buddha, who was born in India, who is the founding Buddha of Buddhism of this time in our culture, who brought these teachings to us at this time in our culture. That's the relative Buddha. And of course that's the one we have to rely upon. That's the one we can see and hear. That's evident, isn't it? You could argue that, the actual musician, you can say like this, no, forget that one. The next one. Okay, the next one is the Dharma. So absolute Dharma is very easy. This is a Sanskrit word, but it's just referring to the knowledge. The experiential knowledge in the mind of a Buddha. So I use the example here of Bach. The actual knowledge about music, the knowledge of music is in the mind of Bach, isn't it? And that's the real music, the knowledge in the mind. So the knowledge in the Buddha's mind is that's the real Dharma, the actual knowledge about reality. But what good is that? You can't access Buddha's mind. He sits there smiling at you for 52 years. Until he speaks, we know nothing because we're not clairvoyant. So until Bach starts writing down all his music with those funny notations on a piece of paper, how can we ever learn to play music? We can't. So out of kindness, Bach writes it down. Out of kindness, Buddha writes it down. That's the relative Dharma. The books, the words, the concepts, the DVDs, the CDs, whatever. This is called speech. The power of speech is the main gift of the Buddha. That's the relative Dharma. But not just in the mind of the Buddha. There's a category of beings called superior beings, Arya beings in Sanskrit. So from the first second that you have realized emptiness in the subtlety of your mind, in shamatha, have got the first direct, non-conceptual insight into the reality of emptiness. The first time you see with absolute clarity that there never has been, isn't, and could never be that fantasy I. You've seen the absence of that fantasy. That's the first realization of emptiness. So from that second, you then stop being an ordinary being, and you begin to climb out of samsara and into nirvana, and you become a superior being. So that anybody who's a superior being from the first second of non-conceptual realization of emptiness all the way to Buddha, they're superior beings. So anybody who hasn't realized emptiness is an ordinary being. Anybody who has realized emptiness is a superior being. It's a term they use. So Buddha says there are countless superior beings, not just one. So then this knowledge in the mind is in the mind not just of the Buddhas, but of all superior beings. In other words, it's actual knowledge. The difference, actual knowledge, experiential knowledge, is the difference between theory, a recipe of the cake, and the taste of the cake. So a person who knows the theory about emptiness, then the person who's experienced emptiness. That's the difference. They taste it. They know the truth of it. The truth of it. That's experiential knowledge. So superior beings have experiential knowledge. So that's the relative Dharma. The relative Dharma is the words, the words, the CDs, the DVDs, the express. What's happening?
Beautiful.
Done. Are we communicating here? So the relative Dharma is the words. They say that we need the Buddha has the power of speech. And just incidentally, we all need this in our lives. We all have to talk. We do jobs. We have parents we talk to, children. People, we go to a shop, you want something, you have to speak. If no one hears your words, how depressing. It's awful, isn't it? No one trusts your words. No one believes your words. People just think, what's this squeak coming out of that person, you know? We need words, powerful words. And how do you get it? By being silent and by not lying, not bad-mouthing, not rabbiting on about nothing, and not bad-mouthing behind backs. That's how you get the power of speech. We all need it badly, and that's the real gift of the Buddha. So powerful, so amazing. That's the relative Dharma, and that's what we have to rely upon. That's the advice, all the words, coming from the knowledge in the Buddha's mind. Then the absolute Sangha are those actual superior beings. But you can't recognise them. It could be the homeless person down the road. It could be that woman next door with 7 children looking all fretted. She could be a superior being, you don't know. They on the Bodhisattva path, they manifest as all shapes and sizes to help sentient beings. They could look like some idiot, a peanut, a dumb person, a mad person. So Tibetans have a saying, you don't know who anybody is, so don't judge. This is very powerful, very sobering. I remember one of our friends, a nun. It's nearly 5 o'clock, are you okay? If you have to go, please do go. Well, yeah. There's one famous one of our famous nuns. Her name's Pemo. I'm sorry, Pemo, she's not listening. She often, you know, I'm sure she's not listening. But Pemo, she won't listen to me. Why? When I always see her, she's my friend. But she's basically, she's famous for being like a bag lady. She's a nun. She's famous for being a bag lady. She has almost have so many things in her bag, she never could be without it. She almost needs a separate cushion when she goes to teachings for her bag, you know. She's renowned as being this kind of strange person. She looks like she's moaning and complaining and unhappy. But then and that's just Pemo, but you hear that Pemo's a meditator, you don't know these things. So when I was editing Mandala, Rinpoche's magazine of our organisation, Rinpoche sent me letters from time to time from his disciples, from his students, about their meditation experiences, because it's really beneficial for us to hear people like you and me having high realizations. It was very moving. So this amazing letter from Pemo, you know, it was crystal clear. It's so powerful, and it showed that she had these high tantric realizations. She completely stopped breathing. She was sitting in the nature of bliss, and all the Buddha starts appearing to her. She takes all the initiations from the Buddha in her kitchen, and she's writing to Lama Zopa about all this. And I thought, my God, this is amazing. She's a highly realized being. Then you still see this funny, wacky lady, you know. So you don't know. And then I remember Holly, Rinpoche's attendant, saying, but Rinpoche, because we did it anonymously in the magazine, published the letter. Rinpoche told me to publish it. And Holly said, Rinpoche, but people know who she is now. He said, yeah, that's good. Now they know who she really is. So even though they still see a bag lady, she's a holy being. But you can't tell. We like holy beings to look nice. We think Dalai Lama's a holy being because he makes us happy. It's not a logical reason. Hitler made people happy. Just because they make you happy doesn't mean they're holy beings. And just because they don't make you happy doesn't mean they're not holy beings. So we don't know. So anyway, that's an example. So these amazing holy beings all bopping around the universe helping sentient beings. That's the actual Sangha. Actual spiritual community, but we don't recognise. So the relative Sangha for the Buddha, and this is why the Sangha, the ordained Sangha, are said to be so powerful for the Buddha. It's for the Buddha, the presence of 4 fully ordained monks or nuns in any one place on the planet is the criterion, the indicator of the existence of the living Dharma in that place. There's always a story they tell in Tibet. At some point, some king, Tibetan king, hated the Dharma, was killing off all the Sangha. So they were so desperate to keep a quota, you need like 10 monks. There weren't never any fully ordained nuns in Tibet. Full ordination never got there. It's in Korea and places, and Vietnam. I took my fully ordained vows with the Vietnamese tradition. It's not in Tibet, and it's not in some other countries as well. But the fully ordained monks, so they were desperate to keep the quota, the number alive, so they could have more ordinations to keep the Dharma alive, because that's the criterion of the existence of the living Dharma. So there's always the story they snuck over some Chinese monk from across the border, and they must have worn blue, because we wear this thing here, this blue thing, in respect to that monk. keeping the Dharma alive in Tibet. So they say the presence of 4 fully ordained monks or nuns in any one place is the criterion of the existence of the living Dharma in that place. That's what they say. So clearly, the real criterion of the existence of living Dharma is the presence of holy beings, of actual knowledge holders, of actual Arya beings. And that's why they say one of the best places to meditate. There are certain qualifications for a place to qualify. It has to be peaceful, quiet, pristine, healthy, not much noise, all these other things. But the key one, they say, is it's been blessed by the presence of previous holy beings who've meditated there. I know when I interviewed monk, Swiss monk, Venerable Rene, I think he's a holy being as well. He meditated for years and years. I interviewed him in Khapa Monastery, which anybody knows if they've been there is very noisy. The dogs yelling and prayers to Shiva at 4 a.m, whatever, down the hill, in the valley. It's quite busy. But all the Tibetans would say Kathmandu is a completely blessed place. For us, it's this polluted place. So I interviewed him at Kopan about his 1.5 or 2.5, I forget now, year retreat, a Shine retreat, Shamatha retreat in Spain, at our centre in the Sierra Nevada. It's a beautiful place. Dalai Lama blessed it. Beautiful place, so pristine. But he said he knew his mind couldn't get more subtle there. So he was at Kopan, and he told me, even though it was busy, he said his mind could get more subtle more easily at Kopan. Because it's considered to be very holy, blessed by the presence of many holy beings. So that was a really important, I thought it was a very interesting point. So relative, absolute Buddha Dhamma Sangha, relative Buddha Dhamma Sangha, they are what we rely upon. That's how they talk, rely upon. Okay. So, person's going to formalise their refuge. You've decided you're ready for that. You've got confidence. I think crucially, I'd say for us in our culture, you're really confident in the idea of no creator. No creator. You've got to feel comfortable with that view. I'd say, put it like that. Therefore, the view of karma, at least theoretically, kind of not contradicting that. At least that's something you can hypothesize. So when you do formalise your refuge, it's very short. We'll do it today for those who want to renew or those who want to take it for the first time if you feel you're ready, you've thought about it. It's only very short, like 5 minutes to do the whole thing. But it's basically you're just committing, you're deciding you're going to commit to rely upon the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha. And the commitments, if you decide to do that, would be, got half a dozen. If those of you who do it, I'll send you a document and it'll explain it all, but I'll tell you now. Roughly speaking, in relation to various things. You're committing, like half a dozen things. You're committing that you'll take refuge, even just a prayer, I'll take refuge in Buddha Dhamma Sangha. 3 times in the morning, 3 times at night. First commitment. Second commitment, that you will offer the first mouthful of your food and drink to the 3 jewels. It's a really good practice to remind us to not be mindless and just shove it in. It's a really helpful thing to do. So it's like generosity. It's a good practice, a good discipline. The next practice is you commit to making offerings in general to the Buddha. Very beneficial. We didn't talk much about that. You're committing to kind of try and study a little bit the Dharma. Obviously, if you commit to playing tennis, you're going to study a bit of tennis, I suggest. Seems reasonable. And you're committing to at least be kind to sentient beings. Try and love them. Try and want them to be happy. Want them to be happy. And then in relation to Buddha, you're committing to have what they call pure view in relation to the 3. In relation to the Buddha, you attempt to have respect for any images or drawings or statues or pictures, even a child's drawing. You cultivate this view of respect towards that because it represents the Buddha. So you wouldn't put it down low, you wouldn't put other things on top of it, you'd kind of have respect for it. So anything we know that we value, you put it up high. You don't put your delicious, fancy, expensive silk shirt on the ground. You don't put the photos, even of your loved ones, stuff it into a drawer. You would never do that. You respect it. You put it up there, and you respect it because it reminds you of what you're trying to become. It's very meaningful. In relation to the Dharma, you have that same attitude towards the books, the DVDs, the CDs, because they contain all the methods that you want to use. So that's your most precious one. And always put those most high. It has great meaning for the mind. It's forcing us to respect them. We don't have that view about books. We chuck them on the ground. We sit on them. It's a really interesting view. It makes you sort of really revere it. It's something so precious. It's very reasonable. It's a very good view. You have to cultivate it. And the third one, you have respect for anybody who's living in the fullness of the vows of Buddha's Vinaya, monks and nuns, etc., because their presence represents the living Dharma in that place, you know. They're the commitments, but when you take refuge. So any questions about that? And then I'll talk about the vows as a second little ceremony that happens after that. So any questions about that so far?
Just to clarify, we offer the first drink and food every time we have a drink.
Yep.
And food.
Yep.
Okay, so not just in the morning and
No.
then.
Every time you have. It's just it's a really good discipline. Anyway, like we've always done before lunch, you think differently. It's just a way of thinking differently. And this way, that's just thinking differently. And then the offering is a very powerful practice. We didn't talk about this at all. But offering, giving, is a very powerful practice. Giving to anybody, it opens the mind. So giving to the three jewels. Let me think, in our culture we think, what do I think giving to the Buddha for? What does he need? That's not the point. The benefit of giving is, we get the benefit. It's a powerful practice. Just to even want to give, even in your mind, because every thought counts, remember. It's a very powerful practice. And it also incidentally helps us kind of lessen attachment and force us to think more mindfully first. Very powerful one. Yeah. What else, Peter? Questions? Yes, yeah.
About the offerings, could you elaborate more on?
Making offerings. Yeah. Well, yeah, there's all, okay. In general, there's all, yeah.
What's the requirement, I guess?
Well, as you know, as you can see from Tibetan tradition coming from India, the Vajrayana. This is Vajrayana. In India, okay, this is called the 8 sense offerings. It's from Tantra, from Vajrayana. There's a whole way of because Tantra is very much about transforming attachment into something beneficial. It's a more advanced level. So here you're making offerings to the Buddha, 8 sense offerings, and apparently it's based on this lovely habit, this thing of if you had a visitor. If you had a guest, the first one represents water for drinking. You'd offer them a gift, offer them a drink, nectar. The next one is water for washing. You'd sit them down and you'd wash their feet. The next one is you offer them flowers, the third one. The fourth is you offer them incense. The fifth one is you offer light, the little white one, candle. The sixth you offer perfume. The seventh you offer food. And the 8th you offer music. So when Atisha came to India, Vajrayana was kind of flourishing, all these wild tantric yogis, and he decided it was all a bit out of control. I'm just sort of joking here. But so for him it was really important that Vajrayana and Tantra was kept really secret. You've got the outer, so the first level of practice is where you, the monk and nun, that's representing subdued body, speech and mind. Buddha is an example of that. The actual presence, the body is completely calm. It indicates completely calm body, completely calm mind, completely calm speech. That's a manifestation of the first level of practice, abiding by the laws of karma. He's the manifestation of that. Then the next level of practice is the bodhisattva path. So that should be hidden. You can still be a monk, but there it's more outrageous level, because you even can do things that would harm others, but because it's based on compassion, it's a valid action. That's more profound. Then the secret one is the Vajrayana, the most secret. So secret not because it's trying to be mean and nasty and hide it from people, because it's kind of advanced. So it can be misrepresented easily. So there's 3 levels of practice. So then this is from the Vajrayana. So normally on altars in India that have beautiful music, a beautiful instrument, lovely food, that have beautiful they would have the actual objects that we're talking about. Well, Atisha was trying to get the Tibetans to become more subdued and hide the secret aspect and make it secret. So he said it's best because the water in Tibet is so pure, you could put water in the offerings and visualize that it's those offerings, which is very sweet, very powerful. So I kind of joke and say, well, the first one is you have your guest, you give them a drink, then you wash their feet, then you give them a flower garland, then you start to put the lights on. No, the incense now, it's getting sexy, you see. Now you put the lights on, then you bring out the perfume, now you bring out the dinner, and finally you bring out the dancing girls. That's my way of saying it, okay? So it's a wonderful, that's Tibetan style, but it's come from the Vajrayana, and it's, we do it even, it's all the monasteries do that, and one does that often, in one's own house. It's a nice way, and I'd say, because we need discipline. So to start a daily practice, for example, you do something in the morning and something at night. I feel like it's bookends holding up the day, because we're creatures of habit and form, aren't we? We need structure. We really helps our mind. So the way you could start the day, if you say you take refuge, you'd start the day even when you wake up. You go, wow, still alive. You think about impermanence. Then you can hop out of bed, and you could, if you wanted, do prostrations. I haven't been doing it because my knee's no good, but normally, one does prostrations. It's a really powerful action of your body. You can do that if you like. But it's a really important discipline. The first thing you do, you'd have an altar like this, some kind of surface. Only because it reminds us. We need things to remind us. You have beautiful pictures of your family to remind you of them. You have lovely things on it reminds you of things. We need that because we need it. So you'd have this nice altar, like a high like that, better not to be too low, where you'd have a statue of the Buddha, a statue of one of the Buddhas you like, or a picture or something, and you'd have a stupa, which represents enlightened mind. The statue represents enlightened body, and behind that's a text in the yellow cloth that represents enlightened speech. So you'd have representations of enlightened body, speech, and mind on your altar, and then you would make offerings to the Buddha. So this is the most perfect practice to do first thing in the morning. And even if you just did that, that's making offerings, and it's powerful because it's to the Buddha, and you would just take refuge 3 times. You have completed your commitment. There's no commitment to sit down with your eyes closed and your legs crossed. There's no commitment to do breathing meditation. That fulfills your commitment to do a start with the day. But okay, if you've got vows and tantric empowerments, you've got more commitments, so you must do them. So the morning is the time, and this is the discipline. We're all lazy. We know we're lazy. You get all excited and you do it first. The second morning you do it. The third morning, I'm too busy. I'll do it later. Goodbye to your practice. Later never comes. We know that. So you have this discipline where you don't wait till after your breakfast. You do it first. So I know this might sound cute and sweet, but the Buddha represents real Buddha. I was just reminding you. And also, if you have devotion and a teacher, you practice thinking the Buddha is your guru, the guru is the Buddha. So I always think this way. If I woke up in the morning and I hear the door knock and it's Lama Zopa, I promise you, I would not sit him down in the lounge and then go and have my breakfast, would I? Even the next door neighbour comes in, you'd offer them a cup of tea first. Would you not do that? Well, that's the point about your practice. So because we just see a statue, like who cares, It shows our minds are so stupid. The Buddha, if Buddha is real, this mind is here, right, the second. That's how they talk as Christians as God. It's the same concept, very similar. Enlightened mind is all pervasive. So you want to practice for your sake. So you do your practice first. It's so beneficial. And if you have a busy life, you get up 5 minutes earlier, And then you just do a little practice. You can sit for 5 minutes if you want to, read something. It's really beneficial. But start small and simple. Keep it essential, not 4 hours and the next day you do nothing. Just something simple, but get the right components so you keep your commitments. So if you've got commitments, like if you take refuge, people forget what they're committed to do, but they'll go and sit and watch their breath for an hour. But you break your commitments. Rather to keep your commitments and do nothing else, than to do something else and not keep your commitments. There's something powerful about keeping the promise that you made really to yourself, but in front of somebody. It's helpful for our mind, It's very helpful. So that's the offerings, and that would be a perfect way to do it. Okay?
Thanks.
What else? Something else? Any other questions about refuge? Yes.
So it's important that I actually do the
You don't have
full,
to, no.
the
You don't have to,
bowls.
no. You don't
So I
have
have
to.
my lights at night. I do the lights like Copan.
Okay, yes, right, exactly.
And each morning I get up.
What do you
first,
do? Yeah.
3 prostrations
And
for
then?
the Dharma Sangha.
Go, yeah, that's right.
And then that's.
No offerings.
Well.
Okay.
I thought the lights at night.
Yeah,
were
but
my
I know.
offering, and then once a week I do the full. And
Oh,
I sit
okay,
down
okay,
for
okay.
an
I hear you. So what's interesting here, the point is, it's what your mind does. So the fact that you offered lights yesterday is you offering lights yesterday.
I do it every night. Every night before I go to bed.
What do you do?
I turn all the lights on.
And you offer lights.
And
and you
they're
offer.
flashing different colours.
And you offer.
Yeah.
In your mind, you're offering.
I am. They're offering.
Okay.
I've
Well
got
then,
my
and they're still
bell,
on.
my
In the
scents.
morning, they're still on.
Yes.
Well, why not offer again?
Yeah. Okay.
They're on. So double. It's like double benefit. Every time your thought has the thought, I want to offer during the day while you're at lunch.
Yeah.
Offer when you're on the toilet. Just have the thought, I'm offering on my lights.
Okay.
Do you understand?
Yeah,
One time,
yeah,
Roger in the plane going down with Rinpoche to Hong Kong, and all the lights at night.
Yeah.
He says, Roger, offer. This is an easy practice to do. Just do it every time. There are the lights you offer. Right there, boom.
Wow.
Rather than thinking, I offered them yesterday, they're already there. Offer today again.
Yeah.
Offer when you go to work, in your mind. It's a stupendous practice.
Okay.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, what else? Questions? Yes.
I think there was that online question.
Where? What
Oh,
time?
that was about the vows celibacy. The
Oh.
online question about.
Oh, thank you very much. I've got to answer that now. Okay. Okay. Well, okay. If attachment effectively is the main delusion, forget ego grasping, but within this universe, it is a realm of desire. This universe karmically, it's like karmic evolution, is the product of countless lifetimes of our attachment. We've created the cause to have a body of 5 holes that need feeding. Do you get my point? And attachment's job is to feed the senses, because that's the method we use to get happiness, isn't it? So we are basically junkies. This is the third kind of suffering. The first kind of suffering is the suffering of suffering when the bad things happen, which is when attachment doesn't get what it wants. The second kind of suffering is the suffering of change, which is when attachment does get what it wants. And the third kind of suffering is having attachment in the first place. And as a result of karma, being born. So attachment is like the junkie in us. The first kind of suffering is when you can't get the junk, it's like a nightmare. The second kind of suffering is when you get the junk, but all it does is create more suffering, because you get more craving. The more you get, the more you want. And the third kind of suffering is being born in the first place in a body that's the result of having attachment, in an environment that's made of the 5 sense objects. The universe is the 5 sense objects. That's heroin out there. So you're born in a body of a heroine with the mind of a heroine, and the world is made of heroin, and to survive you have to ingest it. That's all pervasive suffering. So attachment is what we're talking about here, not even ego grasping. Attachment is the main cause of suffering. So given that, if we look around with our eyes and notice the universe, including all the animals and the ants and the bees, you're going to see they're driven by attachment to bodies. Forget attachment to eating each other. Attachment to joining bodies, boys and girls. Now it's more complicated, I know that. We've made all these stories up about this and that and transgender and binary and non-binary. We've made all this stuff up. We make it up because our minds are so complicated. I'm not being rude about anybody. So we've made up girls and boys. We created over eons of time things that stick, long pokey things that stick in holes. Please hear my point. I'm not trying to be rude. We've created that. What do you think created it? Attachment. Attachment. So that's the major one. The whole world is based upon that, of groups. Okay, it's disintegrating now. People are single and different and go here and go there. But this whole thing of groups, look at animals. And you've got these 2 kinds, now different kinds, have to join up together. Bodies have to join. That's based on attachment. So obviously, giving up that activity is a powerful way to put atomic bombs under attachment, which is a major step to then realising emptiness, which is a major step to get the hell out of samsara. So it's completely logical. But 99.9% of us on this planet won't do that. Even though lots of people are celibate these days, it's very interesting. But they're not taking the vow of celibacy, and it's always the vow that makes it more powerful, the Buddha would say. Are we communicating here, people? Okay. I mean, don't feel bad because you're not celibate. That's okay. Excuse me. Just aim to be celibate next life, that's all. May I become a monk or none if it's beneficial, say. Don't get nervous. If it's beneficial. Okay, what else? We've been talking about vows now. 5:15. Talk about vows now. The next little ceremony, because they're 2 separate ones. This is now a more serious, even more serious one. Now we've already got the 10 don'ts. We've tried to abide by not killing, not lying, not stealing, etc. But here we now formalise 4 of those, plus another one, into a little group called the 5 Vows of Individual Liberation. This whole first level of practice, manifested by the Buddha, is the practices of individual liberation, the practices you have to do to get your liberation, which is the first and second scopes, which is junior school and high school, which is the wisdom wing. So these vows protect you even more powerfully, but to not kill, not steal, not lie, and don't jump on the wrong partner. And the 5th one is no alcohol, no intoxicants. So you break a vow in a major way, killing, if you kill a human being. So to break a vow, you have to have the intention to do it, know it's a vow, not care, have no conscience about it, and have no interest in fixing it. So that's quite heavy, You break it, and if you break it in a major way, you have to take the vow again, because you break the lot at the root. You have to take it again in front of somebody. Break in a minor way if you kill any other sentient being, intentionally, without caring, with no interest to change it. So we have to be, it really protects you from not doing it. It's very powerful. Second, you break lying in a major way, stealing in a major way, if you take the ungiven, Tibetans say. You break that in a major way if you take something of value to someone else. That's the criterion for a major break of stealing. So you could argue $10 from a homeless person is a major break, you know. You could argue that. Then you break in a minor way if you take anything that hasn't been given to you. And I think this is a great discipline because we're very lax about this. We used to just take pencils and books. Now we just press a button on a computer and take movies, you know. You could argue that the movie was offered to you. You could argue that, isn't it? But we know that person must have stolen it, didn't they? Does that? Just recently, I could not get a particular volume of Lama Yeshe Sopa's, Snow Lion's translation of Tsongkhapa's lam-rim Chenmo. No, I couldn't get it online at Amazon or books or anything. I didn't know why. And then I Googled it and I found a PDF online, which means it's free. So I downloaded it, but I put $30 in an envelope and sent it to Snow Lion. Do you understand? Because that's called stealing. I want to pay for it. How dare me, you know? So it's a really strict one to do. Really, really important to keep that very strictly. If it hasn't been given to you, leave it there. And anyway, often it's just we're greedy. And often we just rather not give money. If we think something free will grasp at it, it's just kind of ridiculous, you know? This is not taking the ungiven. It's very powerful. So lying, you break in a major way if you lie about having spiritual attainments that you don't have. So keep your mouth shut. Best practice is private, you know. Only among those who've done the same practices would you even discuss it. It's a really important practice and very respectful, you know. And you break in a minor way if you say anything that isn't true to mislead somebody. That's what drives lies, isn't it? It's always putting you up and someone down. Even if, even if we just sort of exaggerate sometimes. We lie. You have to be very careful with words. Very careful with words, you know. And the fifth one is no intoxicants. So you don't have to take all of them. You take the ones you feel and you take, if you want to have your shot of heroin every day, you don't take the intoxicants one, okay? Or you want to have a drink of alcohol, you don't take that one, just leave it there, you don't take it. But the other four, there's no reason anybody shouldn't take, because you should be delighted to have this as a guideline, and when you know the benefit of vows, that every second you're keeping them, you're ticking over virtuous karma, and you're purifying your mind. It's so amazing. Like I said, you can't get ahead without vows. It's fantastic, and you should be so blissed out that you're even deciding consciously to be a virtuous person, to not harm others. That's pretty incredible on this planet, you know. Pretty amazing. And they protect you. They protect you. They're like there helping you watch your behaviour every day. They're so beneficial. So, of course, we're always going to weaken them slightly. That's why you must do the 4 opponent powers at the end of every day, where you purify anything you broke. You purify your lazy thing. You should have saved that ant, you just couldn't be bothered. You didn't mean to kill it, but you just got a bit lazy sometimes. So you notice these things. So you purify each of these, and you vow, I will never kill, I'll never steal. You really keep them strongly, and that strengthens the vow every day, deepens that groove in your mind. It's very amazing. That's it. Any questions about anything? And then what we can dedicate, and we can finish, and those who want to stay on and do it, people can stay on if they want to watch, it doesn't matter. You can if you like, doesn't matter.
Oh, question.
Yeah. Where? Yes, we have.
Hi. In terms of everyone arriving with their own karmic imprint, is there a particular role for parents when you're very aware of, the different delusions and...
Like you mean you come into this life with high realizations?
No, you've got children.
Oh.
And the culture that we're in would suggest that you've got a responsibility to teach them, to instruct them, to mould them.
But you're right. You do all that. There's no contradiction. But the child who comes into this life, the difference the Buddha would add is you don't start from scratch and mould the shape you want. They come already with their own stuff, and your wisdom will see what they brought with them, and you will help mould their goodness and lessen their badness. But it's their goodness and their badness, and your job is to enhance it.
No,
that's the point.
I get that.
Okay, what's missing? I'm sorry.
Okay, so but the window of time is quite short when they're in childhood, or is it something that stretches all along? I think what I'm really conscious of is, you're seeing these delusions become entrenched in your children.
That's right.
And you're seeing them wanting your assistance in, chasing attachments and really digging those grooves into their brain.
Right.
And it can be quite painful to watch.
Absolutely, it's painful. So, you mean at what point do you stop that job? Would you say I'm resigning from being a mum?
No. Is there a sense of urgency in terms of the
Yes, of course there is.
When they're younger?
Oh no,
does
not
it
so much.
Change when
I
they
hear
get
what
older?
you're saying. It's a great question. Not so much because they're younger, partly because they're very flexible then, but mostly because every millisecond of whatever they do is a karma.
Yeah.
So we have that sense of urgency for ourselves. We're going to have it to help others. Yeah, absolutely, of course, and not to be fanatic though and hysterical about it, but to have wisdom, to see their. That's why it's so powerful to see their mind, what they brought with them. Then you know what you're trying to work with. Then you know how more soft for this one, more strong to that one, more stern with this one, more disciplined for that one. Then you really have wisdom because you know your mind. You can see their mind, and you know what you've got there.
And because of the awareness that by their actions they're without understanding
That's
and
right.
creating their own
That's
karma
right,
or planting
exactly.
their seeds.
Yes.
Is the obligation on you to help them just avoid those situations where they're going to do it?
Absolutely, of course.
So if they're going to be...
Darling, of course it is. That's the
Right.
job of a helper. That's what your job is. Absolutely, without question, that's your job. Absolutely, that's the whole point of a helper. That's what a good friend... I mean, a parent is should be a really good friend. Even with you and your partner, it should be the same thing without being like patronising. You know, they're not your child. But the same thing should be... That's what a genuine friend would be, a person who... And that's what the Bodhisattvas are about, the Bodhisattva vows. You have a vow to do what is best for that person. So maybe to say to that, to tell the person off because it's best for them. Whereas if we just run out of it from attachment, we become weak and pathetic and they can manipulate us. So everything has to be for their benefit. But that's what takes enormous wisdom and enormous patience. And then you've got to realise, I remember there's one woman I know who's got a daughter who, since she was very tiny, really showed she was very unethical automatically and very, very deluded, very lying all the time, really kind of got, even since a very little girl, extremely strong sexual energy, manipulating boys, and later on kind of, out of control behaviour. Not being moralistic, really quite suffering, quite almost, delusional, very lied all the time, stole, really quite unethical. And she began to realise that she didn't make this baby. She has great compassion for this kid, but she can't stop her from what she's doing. She had to let her go. She has sadness for it, but all she can do is just love her for who she is, because she knows she didn't make this child. That's why mothers with the Buddhist view don't have much guilt. Whereas if you think you've made that baby, you're tortured by it. What did I do wrong? So it's so powerful to know they come with their own stuff. And if you've got wisdom, knowing your own mind, you're going to see their mind well and know how to help them.
Right. Taking that example, and you've reached the conclusion that you haven't created them.
Yes.
But is there still pressure on you to help them avoid placing themselves in situations where
That's
they're
what I'm
going
saying.
to
Of course it is. See, the difference is, in our culture, we think we created it, so it's our job to fix them. But the Buddha says it's still your job to help them, but based on what they brought. So that will make your wisdom more skillful.
And based on your understanding.
Yes, of your
karma.
own mind and karma. So you've got a kid who just naturally lies. You have such compassion for them because
Yes.
they don't mean to. They brought it with them. It's so sad. You don't think, oh God, why are they doing this lying? You're a bad kid, beat. You have compassion for them because they're compelled by the power of their past karma. So you have such compassion and you do what you can to help them. But there's only so much you can do. There's only so much you can do for children. Only so much we can do. We have to have the wisdom. First know our own mind, then see the child, and always have compassion and love while they've gone off into drugs, left home, lie and kill and steal. Your heart breaks for them. But there's only so much you can do. Only so much you can do. But the more you know your mind, the more wise you can be in helping your children. And it's never too late. That's why for me, helping people in prison, these young Latino kids, these Mexicans, the very first person who wrote to us, he'd read a book of Lama Yeshe. There he was, 11 since he was a gangster since he's 11, 12 since he's in prison, he's now 18, now 20 or something. He spent his life in prison, and he's a full-fledged gangster, Mexican gangs, really intense in Los Angeles. But he's got this good heart. These Mexicans are amazing, with big hearts, intelligent, but that's his culture, that's all he knew. So he joined the clubs, did what he had to do. Now he's in prison. And then he was joining the gangs in prison. They'd slit each other's throats. They'd do all kinds of things in the prisons, because that's what you do in the gangs. So then he got locked into the security housing unit 23 hours a day, nothing else to do except use his intelligence, go crazy or whatever. So he starts to study. And there's a good library in this particular prison, which is one of the heaviest ones in California. And he got a book by Lama Yeshe, like a miracle, So he saw our name, he wrote to us, and that's the beginning of the prison project. So many of his colleagues and later on other people, Latino gangsters, who kill each other and rape the women. They've become Buddhists because those imprints were there, but because they changed their condition, the goodness came out of them. So moving to see it. So that's why one of the key things for me, which we don't often say in the West, I always mention this briefly. I said one time, one mother in a class, crying, my kid throws chairs at me, what can I do? variations of that, you know. So the first thing I always ask is, tell me her good qualities. And it turns out she's moral, she's ethical, she's kind, she's compassionate to animals. Yes, she gets angry. Yes, she chucks chairs, but she's got some fundamentals of good ethics. If you've got fundamentals of good ethics, you will be fine. That we have to never forget. We don't think of ethics in our culture, because what we do in our culture is look at the behaviour. I mean, I was an outrageously behaved child. They would have locked me up and given me 47 drugs if they'd been around at that time. Do you understand? But my ethics, it was so strong. I was in love with God. I thought of God all day. But no one knew. They didn't ask me. But I had violent anger and attachment, you know. Wild. This one kid I know, son of a friend of mine, who was classically called these days autistic, high-functioning autistic, super intelligent, wild energy, super intelligent, you can tell. She's a Buddhist, a student of Lama Zopa's. So sort of, you could deduce he must be somebody special, this wild energy. So, and she said that the teachers, when he was like 3, were calling him autistic. I said, for God's sake, talk to Lama Zopa, ask him. So I wish I can see exactly who this person is, gives them all these practices to memorise this and memorise that. And he started to do it, and I said, why don't you send a picture to the Tibetan doctor? Because they're these amazing lamas, they're clairvoyant, they just have to see a photo. So she sent a photo to this Tibetan doctor in Dharamsala, and a few symptoms. And he wrote back, yeah, that's how yogis behave. So why, all these high-level autistic kids in this culture, for me I find it so monstrous. They're highly developed beings, because a yogi isn't some floaty person. A yogi has a mind like a laser, super intelligent, super sharp, but kind of wild energy. You've got to contain it. So you give them channels to contain their energy, not suppress it, you know. I mean, it's such a misunderstanding in our culture. We're so terrified of anything that gets out of line. And we give them all these drugs, it's just monstrous. I mean, he would have been called mentally ill by another person. But there's a yogi, and now he's got this, he's an amazing, bright little kid with a brilliant little mind. He's now getting older, channeling his energy, doing something useful. So we've got to really interpret in a different way. And ethics is so powerful. Ethics means you've got kindness, you love animals, you're good to people. But if you lie and steal like this young girl, then that's sad. You have compassion, but there's only so much you can do if the habits are so strong. You understand? So then we can finish. Shall we do dedication prayers? It's 2 days, gone like a dream, isn't it? Sunday it's 5:30. Sunday it was Saturday mornings, now it's 5:30 on a Sunday. And all these, but every second has been a seed we've planted. So be totally delighted about that. We've sown all these marvellous seeds. And whatever you do with this is your business from now on. You become a Mickey Mouseist. I don't care. But if you keep using these seeds, know your mind, take responsibility, be authentic, be accountable, grow up, stop being a victim, stop blaming, zip your lip and keep your hands to yourself. You'll have happy relationships and the other person can deal with their problems and you can deal with your problems and you'll deal with each other, your own problems together. That's a perfect relationship. But we're obsessed with fixing other people's problems. Back off and mind your own business. If you do this, you'll have a happy life, I tell you. And then you can go further if you want, it's up to you. So, Jangchob, Semchob Rinpoche, Ma Kye Panam Kye Guchi, Kye Panyampa, Me Pa Yang Gong Ne Gong Du, Helba Shoga, may compassion and body to grow and grow and grow in the hearts of all. I mean, we never give up. Never give up, please. Never give up. That's the main thing.
Mother of the victorious ones was 3 times.
What's happening?
Okay,
let's you don't have to read it. Are you telling people what it is, please? And Jason, if you're going to do something, tell people.
Yes,
they're all looking in their little books.
Life prayer that we've got at the back of the books, please.
Communicative. I mean, what to do? You did mention, I'm sorry.
You weren't here.
Oh, okay. That's all we're looking.
Okay. Are we ready?
Yes. And if you have any teachers yourself, think these words refer to them. You want your teachers to live long so they can bring the Dharma, so we can develop our qualities, so we can become like them. Think like that, okay? Think like that.
Okay. Mother of the victorious ones,
3 times in tender reverence, stand high, great bliss embraced by great compassion, like perfect Tara, who in ordinary form are the guide for us beautiful transmigrating beings left guideless. How kind you are! May all your wishes be instantly fulfilled, and may your life be stable until samsara ends. Almighty One, you destroy all the enemies of delusions, who reveal the Dharma of scripture and realization, spreading it in mental continuum of transmigrating beings, thereby eliminating the two obscurations, including their imprints. How kind you are. May all your wishes be instantly fulfilled, and may your life be stable until samsara ends. By the blessings of the Guru, the deity, and the Dharma protectors, and unbetraying actions and their results, as well as the truth of ultimate reality, in all my lifetimes may I only please, and never displease for even 1 second, the Guru, and may the vital points of my prayers be fulfilled.
So now we can say goodbye to each other.